In his former life, it happened during the very battle where he met his end. On that battlefield, Damien lost every comrade who had stood beside him. As he staggered across the ruined field, wounded and exhausted, he muttered bitterly that the whole operation had been far too reckless. He already knew it was practically a death sentence, since barely 100 men were ordered to face more than 2,000. Back then, Damien served as a centurion in the Baroque kingdom's punitive force. He cried out in pain as he watched it unfold. His comrades fell around him, and Damien could only regret not being able to do more. Although the mission was completed, the entire team was wiped out. Damien carried the blame himself, wishing he had been just a bit stronger so he could have protected them all. Yet in the end, he had failed everyone. He could not even save himself, collapsing on the battlefield while realizing his final moments had arrived. As Damien's life passed before his eyes, regrets flooded his mind. More than anything, he wished he had joined the army before turning 25, believing things might have changed. That regret burrowed deeper into him, and Damien clenched his teeth, desperately longing for a single chance to begin again. If such a thing were possible, he would have started sooner and fought proudly beside his comrades on the battlefield. But he was dying now with no miracle anywhere in sight. At least, that was what he believed in his final seconds. However, fate seemed to have a different path prepared for him, and his desperate wish somehow became reality. Damien woke as if he had just returned from a dream of his previous life. Panicking, Damien rubbed his face to check whether it had all been some strange dream. To his relief, it was real, and he had returned 17 years before everything began. Damien quietly examined his hands. Then he checked his lower abdomen, where his mana core rested. For warriors, the mana core was the foundation of mana training. In his past life, Damien's mana core had been ruined. This time, however, it was unharmed, and he felt relief knowing he could finally learn to use mana. In his previous life, after Parker cheated him out of the insurance money, Damien was cast out and forced to survive on odd jobs in the back alleys. As an orphan abandoned by his guardian, he even took the blame for a higher-up in a back alley gang and ended up imprisoned. While in prison, Damien was forced into military service and sent straight to the battlefield. Damien had thought that life would end there after becoming a centurion, never imagining he would be reborn before everything collapsed. Overcome with relief, Damien sank back onto the bed and let out a deep sigh, grateful that things had somehow worked out. Fortunately, the years of skills and instincts he had forged in the army were now about to keep him alive. Just then, Damien sensed movement beyond his door. He sprang to his feet at once. Then he drew a dagger hidden beneath his pillow. The moment the intruder pushed the door open, Damien lunged with his dagger, striking before they could recover from the shock. Before they could react, he drove the blade into one intruder's thigh. He pulled it free at once, though he felt slightly disappointed that only half the blade had gone in. Even so, it was enough to send the enemy collapsing in pain. Meanwhile, the second intruder cursed at Damien and rushed into attack. Damien avoided the blow with ease. The man tried to strike once more. Damien suddenly stepped in and drove the dagger into the assassin's upper thigh. After pulling the blade back, Damien fixed the intruders with a chilling glare and demanded to know who had sent them. As the intruders struggled on the floor in pain, Damien seized one of them and demanded to know if his Uncle Parker was behind this. When the man refused to answer, Damien wounded his thigh again and repeated the question with rising fury. Before he could get an answer, another man appeared, seemingly the one in charge. He stepped into the room and commented on how frightening Damien looked. Damien instantly recognized the blonde man as Mukman, a scoundrel from his past life, and Mukman was startled when Damien called him by name. Once Damien saw Mukman involved in the attack, realization struck him all at once. He immediately finished off the assassin he had been questioning. Then he smiled coldly, realizing that everything from his former life had likely been arranged by his uncle through Mukman. Back then, after Damien was driven out, he had fled to the back alleys in search of shelter, but it always seemed strange to him that thugs suddenly caught him so easily. Looking back now, it was clear that Parker had arranged it all to steal Damien's inheritance. The realization filled him with rage. Damien turned toward the second assassin. With bloodshot eyes, he declared that Parker had truly betrayed him. Even with Damien's terrifying expression, Mukman showed no fear. He immediately rushed forward, intending to end the fight. Damien, however, slipped away from the attack. Mukman froze in shock, while Damien found it almost amusing and wondered if Mukman had always been this pathetic. Refusing to be beaten by a child, Mukman kept attacking, but Damien smoothly avoided every strike. What Mukman did not know was that Damien had gained a rare instinct after countless beatings and many life-threatening moments, allowing him to read an opponent's movements. The instant an enemy prepared to strike, Damien could sense it from their gaze, their stepping direction, the twist of their waist, and the movement of their shoulders all revealed exactly where the attack would come from. Mookman rushes at him once more. Damien's ability has already traced the strike aimed for his head, letting him slip aside with ease. The move leaves Mookman both stunned and furious. Unwilling to lose to a mere kid, Mookman attacks wildly. Yet every motion is so easy to read that Damien avoids him without effort. Before Mookman can respond, Damien lands a sharp strike on his wrist. Blow forces Mookman to let go of his blade. Mookman reaches for the fallen weapon while Damien pulls his dagger free from Mookman's wrist. Mookman mutters a curse at Damien, but before his fingers can close around the sword, Damien suddenly drives his dagger into Mookman's abdomen. Shocked and bewildered, Mookman sinks to the floor, unable to understand what just happened. No matter how he thinks about it, he cannot accept that a simple brat brought him down so easily. Without the slightest pause, Damien draws the dagger back. Mookman is left near tears, wondering how a 13-year-old could avoid his strongest moves and wound him so casually. Noticing the question in Mookman's eyes, Damien decides to end his confusion by explaining exactly how he lost. Damien calmly reveals that he could tell where Mookman would strike, predicting his next move the instant Mookman lifted his arm. Mookman is stunned by the claim and can barely believe something so ridiculous. At this stage of Damien's rebirth, mana manipulation is still not widely known. Since Mookman refuses to believe him, Damien says he does not care. Instead of begging for his miserable life, Mookman insists this is not the end. Gritting his teeth, he threatens that his men will seek revenge once word of his capture spreads. Damien reminds him that he will not live long enough for any rumor to spread. Damien presses the blade against Mookman's throat. He warns Mookman to answer wisely and reveal whether Parker hired them to get rid of him. Mookman stays silent, stubbornly refusing to speak, so Damien threatens to leave him crippled and force him to spend the rest of his life limping. Seeing the terrifying look on Damien's face, Mookman cannot help but wonder how a 13-year-old could wear such an empty, merciless expression. Overcome with fear, Mookman quickly admits that Parker hired them to capture Damien alive. Yet the instant Mookman finishes confessing, Damien's blade brings everything to an end, leaving Mookman stunned as his final moments flash before him. After taking down the final intruder, Damien chooses to settle matters at home before beginning his mission to dominate the world. One of the few lessons from his past life was the value of avoiding enemies whenever possible. But if circumstances forced him to create one, he firmly believed they had to be crushed completely before they could return later and become a future danger. Elsewhere, Parker waits with another henchman named Montel. They keep checking the time anxiously while waiting for Mookman to deliver Damien. Parker feels uneasy, but Montel assures him the job will be completed. Montel then remarks that Parker must have been furious to hire someone just to capture a little brat. Remembering his humiliation, Parker slams his fist on the table while nursing the swollen cheek left by Damien's punch. As Parker lowers his head in shame over being humiliated by a child, Montel tells him to wait longer and warns him not to reduce the payment over the delay. Just then, they sense someone standing at the door. Montel goes to check, assuming their men have arrived with Damien packed away. Parker grows excited, imagining how he will torment Damien while keeping him barely alive because of the insurance contract. He angrily swears that once the insurance issue is settled, he will wipe Damien out completely. Meanwhile, Montel cracks the door open, ready to scold his men for showing up late. In the next instant, a dagger darts through the gap and nearly hits him, though Montel manages to dodge in time. He quickly realizes the assassins must have failed. Behind him, Parker turns pale, clearly shaken by the sudden change. At that moment, Damien walks into the room with predator-like confidence. When Montel asks if he is Damien, he answers boldly and immediately calls Montel a lackey. Montel is briefly thrown off by the unexpected nickname. Damien then explains that Montel is nothing more than Parker's errand boy, obeying whatever command he is given. The explanation only makes Montel laugh. He turns to Parker and demands 3 times the commission they originally agreed on. Parker is shocked by the sudden demand, but Montel immediately explains that his group has taken serious losses. That makes the assignment far more expensive than he first expected. He then gestures toward the blood darkening the tip of Damien's spear. Montel notes that an unexpected variable has appeared, since it is no small matter for one brat to bring down a 3-man team so easily. Even after hearing Montel's reasoning, Parker tries to object to the sudden rise in payment. In response, Montel puts away his sword and quits the job on the spot. Parker quickly stops him after taking another look at Damien and realizing just how frightening he appears. Parker hastily agrees to pay triple. Being left alone with someone like Damien makes him fear he may not survive. Montel, however, is pleased with the successful negotiation and gets ready to deliver Damien as promised. He tells Damien that he feels nothing for his fallen teammates, since their relationship was only a business deal and carried no personal attachment. Damien, however, coldly tells Montel that this is not simply another payday for him. What they do not know is that Damien sees this as revenge for the suffering they caused after his uncle threw him out. Their collusion left him wasting away in the back alleys for much of his former life. Worse still, his Manticore was ruined during that time, so in this life, he has no intention of letting any of them escape consequences. Driven by revenge, Damien tells Montal to stop asking questions and simply meet his end. However, Montal sneers at him as an arrogant brat and rushes in, certain he can easily deal with a minor nuisance like Damien. Yet before his blow can connect, Damien nearly lands a dangerous counter, forcing Montal to twist away just in time. That was because he had already noticed Damien was targeting his legs. Damien, in turn, is impressed by Montal's ability and realizes he is not ordinary rabble like the intruders from before. Even so, the two keep clashing until, at one point, Montal decides to catch Damien off guard with a hidden attack. He fakes a punch toward Damien's face, waiting for the instant Damien lifts his arms to block. That opening is exactly when Montal intends to drive his weapon into Damien's thigh. Convinced the trick will work, Montal is already celebrating his success in his head. The moment Damien slips away from the punch, Montal follows through and aims for his thigh, just as he planned. To his shock, Damien avoids both strikes with ease, leaving Montal stunned that his scheme had been read so clearly. Before Montal can respond, Damien batters him several times with the blunt end of his spear. He then calmly reveals that he had seen through Montal's plan from the very beginning. At this point, Montal loses his temper and spits out furious curses at Damien. He is just about to swear revenge when a sudden strike across his throat cuts his villainous declaration short. As the final moments rush through his mind, Montal grips his neck and struggles for air. But it is already too late, and he collapses to the ground. Looking down at him, Damien notes that he was stronger than a thug like Mukman, yet still nothing more than back alley trash. After finishing that matter, Damien slowly turns his predator-like gaze toward his uncle. Terrified, Parker drops to his knees in a panic, shaking as he struggles to beg Damien for mercy. Ignoring the pleas, Damien silently approaches to end things while Parker keeps begging for his miserable life. But letting Parker go was never part of Damien's plan. Parker's screams soon echo through the night. A few days after settling the score, Damien goes to claim the insurance money. The agent tells him the payout totals 6 platinum and 650 gold, with 1 platinum equaling 1,000 gold, and a family of 4 needing only 2 gold a month. In other words, the payout could let Damien live comfortably for the rest of his life. Once the accounts are settled, the now terrified agent thanks Damien for placing his trust in him. Just as Damien prepares to leave, the man nervously calls after him and asks where he is going. He explains that Damien arrived in a carriage packed for a long trip, so he could not help being curious about the destination. When Damien says he plans to join the army, the agent is taken aback. Damien explains that there are certain people he is looking forward to meeting. Not long after, Damien begins his journey to enlist in the military. Although meeting his comrades is one reason, Damien has another reason for choosing this path. It is because the army is the only place where he truly belongs. On top of that, according to his memories from his previous life, the world will fall into chaos within 5 years. By then, most young men will be forced into service, because an age of war is coming, and no one will be able to avoid it. Now that he has a second chance and his mana core remains undamaged, Damien is thrilled to volunteer while still young, rather than joining too late, as he did in his past life. His plan is to reach the capital first, train there for a week using the Delft mana cultivation method, and then apply to the 3rd training camp. This time, Damien is resolved to create his own future. Instead of being swept along like an ignorant youth, he intends to stand above this era. A week later, Damien finally arrives at the enlistment grounds. During training, he quickly starts drawing attention from the other recruits. Everyone wonders how someone so young can handle himself so well. Damien pays no mind to their whispers and keeps his focus on training. Once training ends, he notices several wounds on his palm from using the spear and considers wrapping his hand in bandages. His body, he realizes, is still far too weak. His hands are nothing like the calloused ones he had in his previous life. At that moment, an instructor breaks into Damien's thoughts and asks if he came to apply as a trainee. Damien says yes, and the instructor praises his spear technique. The instructor then asks where he learned it, but Damien hesitates, wondering if the man recognizes it as the kingdom's finest spear art. Despite its ridiculous name, this spear art is the style most widely used among the kingdom's soldiers. After thinking for a moment, Damien says he learned it from his late father. The instructor immediately feels guilty for bringing up painful memories and apologizes. Damien warmly waves it off and says he is proud his father served in the military. He adds that he is simply following in his father's footsteps, moving the instructor with his talent, dedication, and family legacy. At the moment the instructor realizes what he nearly promised, he quickly takes his words back. Once he regains his composure, he asks Damien for his name. Damien answers with the bearing of a soldier. Soon after, the instructor turns to leave and wishes Damien luck in the trial. Damien thanks him, and after the instructor walks away, Damien suddenly feels mana surging inside his core. Realizing what is happening, Damien is overjoyed that he can finally use mana. It is the one power he never managed to awaken in his past life. The method he uses is called the Delft mana cultivation method, created 15 years in the future by a genius of the Delft family. Though strict and demanding, it is renowned as the most efficient way to cultivate mana. Damien knows this because, in his previous life, he studied every mana cultivation book he could find. Even with his manachore destroyed, he memorized the method while desperately searching for a way to cultivate. Still, he never found one, and his comrades often mocked him for studying cultivation techniques when he could not even control mana. Damien had always been furious about it, but looking back now, all that ridicule had finally turned into something useful. With one of his goals now achieved, Damien chooses to concentrate on the trial ahead and clear the enlistment exam. After that, he looks around, searching for a familiar face from his former life. That person had also come from the 3rd training camp, but Damien's search brings him no results. After all, he has no idea what that person looks like at this point in time. Not long after, the applicants are gathered together, and their first challenge is to lift a boulder. The test seems straightforward, but raising a boulder over your head when it weighs more than 30 kilograms is hardly easy. Even so, it is an ideal way to filter out rookies who are too ambitious for their own good. Damien is not one of them though, as he passes the first test with barely any effort. For others, it may be much harder. For Damien, however, it is different, because he has already reached 1-star mana. Once the first test ends, an instructor steps forward and makes an announcement. The second test will be a long-distance race. He explains that they must complete the entire course within 1 hour and 30 minutes. Under the rules, shoulder bumps and small collisions during the race are allowed. However, he warns that directly attacking another applicant is strictly forbidden. Damien instantly understands that this rule is most likely in place because a few instructors have been planted among the crowd to make things more exciting. The instructor continues reading the rules, stating that anyone who leaves the marked track will be disqualified. After listening to the rules, Damien feels amused and begins looking forward to a more entertaining test. A few minutes later, Damien is warming up when a blonde guy suddenly acts overly friendly toward him. Damien is confused since he has not made any friends since being reborn. The blonde guy then tells Damien he has been watching him for some time. Damien wonders why he was being observed, and at that moment, he realizes the man looks strangely familiar. While Damien is still trying to remember him, the guy leans in far too close and asks if Damien truly has no idea why he is interested in him. Seeing Damien still puzzled, the blonde guy suddenly whispers that he knows Damien can use mana. Damien is shaken, but he stays calm because no rule forbids commoners from learning mana. Still, when a commoner can use mana, it usually means a powerful family supports them or they possess some unusual background. At that moment, Damien finally remembers where he has seen this face before. To confirm it, he asks the guy for his name. When the blonde introduces himself as Apple, Damien is stunned to realize that such a legendary figure began in this very place. In Damien's previous life, Apple was a legend among legends who rose into a powerful general. He even earned the title of Count at only 30, becoming the perfect success story for commoners. Because of that, everyone saw him as the standard of success. While Damien is still deciding how to deal with Apple's revelation, Apple offers a friendly gesture and suggests they cooperate since they are close in age. Damien accepts the handshake. After all, there is no downside to joining hands with a future great general, especially when Apple is the one reaching out first. Several minutes later, the instructor orders everyone to prepare for the race. The moment he gives the signal, the applicants burst forward at once. Damien notices that many of them charge ahead with full strength from the very start. Then, without warning, a row of massive men blocks the applicants at the rear, leaving everyone baffled. One man explains that this formation is called the Wall of Wailing, and breaking through it is the true challenge. Hearing that, Apple suggests staying behind them and passing the huge men near the end. Damien says the plan is solid, but it does not suit his current approach. He immediately launches forward with incredible speed. Apple is left stunned. Meanwhile, some applicants are taking the race slowly, and one of them proposes the same plan Apple had suggested, which his friends quickly support. But in the next instant, one of them spots Damien charging up from behind like a blazing shooting star. As the blonde man wonders what kind of lunatic would run that fast, another guy notices Damien and prepares to bring him down a little. The blonde warns him not to hurt Damien, saying he should only shake his confidence and wake him up. The other man gets excited and eagerly waits for Damien to test his steel-like shoulder muscles. Still, he promises to go easy on him. Yet before he can even finish speaking, Damien effortlessly moves past him. He shifts the huge man aside as if he weighs nothing, instantly tearing through the wall and leaving the man speechless. Damien then speeds away with ease, leaving the others behind in growing panic. Before long, several of them begin chasing him, confirming Damien's suspicion that skilled instructors are hidden among the applicants. Even so, Damien is not the least bit concerned. They are only training camp instructors, and he does not consider them worth worrying about. Meanwhile, behind them, the ordinary applicants are still struggling to keep pace, except for Apple. Inspired by Damien, Apple becomes fired up and decides to follow his lead. Apple immediately sprints forward, leaving the other applicants shocked. That sudden move gives them a rush of adrenaline, pushing them to advance instead of sticking to their original plan of waiting until the last moment. Up ahead, the instructors are startled to see yet another fast monster racing toward them. From the audience area, other instructors are also watching the strange situation unfold. One of them observes that the atmosphere on the training ground has changed slightly. Another instructor suggests sending in more instructors to raise the difficulty, but a voice tells them to stop. It is Instructor Raymond, the same man who approached Damien and nearly passed him before training began. Raymond says adding more instructors is unwise, or everyone may realize the exam is being manipulated. He adds that it is expected for applicants to overcome instructors, since that is part of their ability. Raymond then watches like a proud father as Damien rushes past, quietly noting that his judgment of Damien was correct. He is also impressed that Damien's actions have created a ripple effect, stirring the other applicants into action. Raymond sees Damien as the kind of battlefield leader who knows how to ignite courage in others. Soon after, Damien breathes heavily as he finishes his 20th lap. He then begins the final stretch toward the finish line. At that moment, Apple catches up, and Damien comments that the guy still has plenty of stamina left. Apple asks if Damien chose that running strategy because he already understood something. Without mana, they would have run out of strength just like the others. Damien says he did not plan anything, but if someone has a useful card, they should play it. Apple finds the answer rather interesting and tells Damien that he is an intriguing person. Damien returns the compliment, then steps across the finish line with Apple following right behind him. The instructor promptly announces that both of them have passed the second test. Meanwhile, a high-ranking official hears that an unusual applicant has entered the third camp. An instructor explains that Raymond has already contacted him about it and reveals that Damien is only 13 years old. The official is surprised that Raymond actually found someone worth noticing, since he is rarely impressed. That alone makes him even more curious about who Damien really is. So he asks the instructor to tell him Damien's name. Back at the training camp, the test results are finally posted. Some applicants cry over their failure, while others cheer loudly after passing. Damien, however, feels no excitement and even finds their celebration strange. With the era of chaos only a few years away, he sees no reason to rejoice over enlistment. During the war in his former life, military service became mandatory, and people struggled desperately to avoid being drafted. Thinking about it now, Damien realizes the world is still enjoying peace. Just then, Apple calls out to Damien and congratulates him for getting into the training camp. Damien pretends to be surprised that Apple also passed the test. Apple says he saw Damien's name at the top of the list. Damien claims he only just noticed, and Apple says he looks forward to working with him, even if they are placed in different units. Since they still have a week before official enlistment, Apple asks what Damien plans to do with his free time. Damien answers casually that he has several matters to handle, so he will probably be busy. When Apple asks what he means, Damien simply says he needs to gather supplies. Hearing that, Apple remembers an essential enlistment item and advises Damien to buy it. Apparently, the army provides combat boots as hard as stone, so recruits are told to buy soul and heel pads. Damien acts as if this is new information. In truth, he already knows the misery of military boots from his past life. Even so, he thanks Apple for the tip, which makes Apple feel genuinely helpful and appreciated. Damien then asks what Apple plans to do before enlistment, and Apple says he has many things to handle. However, he quickly glosses over it, as if he does not want Damien asking for details. Damien understands the hint. He says goodbye to Apple and leaves to prepare for enlistment. Apple quietly watches Damien walk away. A few minutes later, an old man named Alan arrives and asks Apple who Damien is. While Apple thinks about how to answer, he remembers asking Damien during the match why he wanted to enlist. Judging by the amount of mana Damien could control, Apple knew he was far from ordinary. Damien had jokingly treated that as praise, because if Apple could read his mana level, then Apple was not ordinary either. In response to Apple's question, Damien said he enlisted because the army was the only place left for him. Looking back on it now, Apple feels Damien must have deeper reasons that he cannot easily reveal. When Alan asks who Damien is, Apple simply says he is someone they will be seeing for a long time. Alan fails to understand, so Apple casually avoids explaining further. As they prepare to leave, Alan calls Apple Young Master and tells him the carriage is waiting. Apple reminds Alan not to call him Young Master in public. Alan immediately apologizes, and the two of them head toward their carriage. Elsewhere, Damien walks through the lively streets of the capital. He notices that it looks very different from the capital he remembers from his previous life. Everything is still peaceful, and people still have food to eat. The capital in Damien's memory was gloomy and filled with hunger. In 5 years, this bright atmosphere will disappear completely, so Damien resolves to prepare for the coming age of chaos. To begin, he plans to find the Work Merchant Guild, a group that became a major power during the war in his past life. Damien knows that once war breaks out, artifacts, weapons, and food supplies will become the most valuable goods. Naturally, merchant guilds will then hold a vital position. In his previous life, the richest merchant guild on the continent was the Work Merchant Guild. Back during the war, Damien and his comrades always waited eagerly for the relief supplies they delivered. On one of those days, when the Work Merchant Guild arrived with their usual provisions, some soldiers grumbled with envy, complaining that merchants lived comfortably while soldiers suffered on the battlefield. Damien reminded them that without the guild providing food and weapons, they would not have survived. The complaining soldier admitted he understood, but said he was only grumbling because he felt bitter and jealous. Damien, however, felt grateful to the Work Merchant Guild, knowing it could not be easy to keep funding relief efforts with their own money. He then tells the soldiers to go collect the supplies. Meanwhile, he stays behind and watches them from a distance. One soldier then draws Damien's attention to the guildmaster of the Work Merchant Guild. However, Damien cannot clearly see the guildmaster's face because the person is wearing a white cloak. Still, he had glimpsed some of the blonde man's features, and at the time, his men had described the guildmaster as an arrogant young brat. Back in the present, Damien begins thinking about how to find the guild, since it has not gained much fame yet. From what Damien remembers, the guild had already begun charity work before the war. Since the capital has 40 merchant guilds, he narrows the search down to 7. Among those 7, he figures he only needs to inspect the ones with enough funds to support charity work. Unfortunately, a full day of searching gives Damien no results, but he still chooses to visit the final name on his list, the Yahello Guild. When he enters the guild, a man welcomes him. Damien quietly returns the greeting, hoping this is the place he needs, then says he wants to discuss investing in their charity efforts. The man brightens at once and invites Damien to sit, praising his noble spirit at such a young age. Though doubtful, Damien plays along, hoping the Yahello Guild will not be another dead end. In the next moment, Damien's eyes sharpen when the man introduces himself as Work, guildmaster of the Yahello Merchant Guild. Damien introduces himself in return, and Work asks him to take a seat so they can continue discussing the investment. Before that, Damien apologizes and asks whether Work has a son. Work laughs at the unusual question, then explains that he has only one daughter. Damien is immediately disappointed, since the future guildmaster of the Work Guild should have been a boy. Yet that disappointment disappears almost instantly. It vanishes the moment Work's daughter, Dianal, walks into the room. Damien instantly notices that she resembles the man in the white cloak from his past life, though the difference in gender still leaves him uncertain. After Dianal enters, Work introduces Damien and explains that he is interested in investing in their charity project. Dianal greets Damien brightly, then asks about the investment again to confirm that what she heard from her father is true. Damien confirms it, while quietly trying to determine whether Dianal is truly the white-cloaked figure from his previous life. Aside from her gender, every detail seems to match, including her appearance and age. Damien remembers that the guildmaster's beauty once made him stand out, so he wonders if that was because the guildmaster was actually a woman. He also cannot explain how Dianal later inherited the name Work. Dianal asks how much Damien intends to invest and explains that the amount will affect how they use the funds. Damien says he will begin with 300 gold and add more later depending on how the situation develops. Dianal and Work are both stunned to hear that Damien is offering such a large amount. After a short silence, Work asks what Damien expects in return, since this clearly is not a simple donation. Damien explains his terms clearly. He wants to purchase a portion of the Yahello Merchant Guild's shares and receive part of the profits in exchange for his investment. Work is startled to hear such an ambitious proposal from a boy so young. He also cannot ignore the question of where Damien obtained the money, so he asks about it carefully. Damien assures Work that the money is legitimate, explaining that he simply wants to put his late parents' inheritance towards something meaningful. Hearing that, Work feels guilty for prying and quickly apologizes for being rude, but Damien tells him it is fine. Work then says he must discuss the matter with the guild members and asks Damien for some time. Damien agrees to wait. After Damien leaves, Work cannot stop thinking about him. When Dianal asks why, Work says Damien's attitude fascinated him. Although Damien is only 13, Work feels certain that he is no ordinary child. The depth in Damien's eyes especially leaves a strong impression. Work even says it would be perfect if Damien were 5 years older, because then he would be an ideal match for Dianal. Flustered, Dianal shouts at him to stop trying to play matchmaker. Work keeps teasing her anyway, asking whether she prefers older men. After Damien's meeting with Dianal and the Yahello Merchant Guild, time passes quickly, and soon the day of enlistment arrives. Standing before the enlistment camp, Damien feels relieved, as if this is the day his true new beginning finally starts. His previous life may have ended without meaning, but Damien swears this life will follow a different path. Clenching his fist tightly, he vows that this time, he will devour the Empire before it can devour him. A short while later, Damien heads to the first platoon of the 3rd training camp, where he has been assigned. He scans the room at once but sees no familiar faces, making him wonder if Apple was placed in another platoon. Damien feels slightly disappointed, since he had hoped to serve in the same unit as Apple, because they are the same age. A few minutes later, an instructor arrives and greets the recruits in a cheerful tone. He introduces himself as Brian and tells them he will lead their platoon for the next month. Brian announces that he will inspect everyone's personal belongings, explaining that food, drinks, and luxury items are not allowed. He sternly orders anyone carrying alcohol or cigarettes to come forward at once, warning that hidden contraband will be punished. Just then, Damien spots 2 men fidgeting in the corner. One quietly complains that he quit smoking but forgot to remove his cigarettes, while the other says a shopkeeper claimed alcohol was allowed. Annoyed, Damien silently curses them for being foolish enough to make their secret so obvious. Brian orders everyone to lay out their belongings and begins searching from Damien's side. After checking Damien's things, he announces that Damien is clear. Still, after looking more closely, Brian asks Damien's age because he appears far too young. Damien answers that he is 13, leaving everyone around him shocked. A muscle-headed recruit named Kyle immediately takes the chance to mock Damien for joining the army, while his friend jokes that Damien only wants free meals for life. Damien overhears them and shoots them a sharp glare for insulting him openly. When Kyle notices, he tries to provoke a fight. Damien ignores him, knowing there is no point lowering himself to Kyle's level. Even so, he memorizes Kyle's face and glares again, this time with a chilling pressure. In that moment, Damien decides he will one day force Kyle to submit, and make him remember it was a kid who did it. As the mood grows unbearably tense, a bald recruit nearby shivers as goosebumps rise across his skin. Brian then tells him to show his belongings, and the bald man pulls out a few rags, claiming that is everything he brought. The next moment, Brian leans close and quietly asks whether he really needs to search him. Frightened, the bald man quickly scrambles to reveal all the banned items he had thought were hidden so well. Brian repeats his warning, making it clear that anyone caught hiding contraband will spend the entire night running laps around the training yard. The moment they hear that, the recruits begin shaking with fear. When Brian roars for them to hand over anything they are hiding, a dozen recruits rush to obey, except Damien, the perfect model recruit. After the inspection comes to an end, Brian announces that they will now choose a cadet platoon leader to act on his behalf whenever he is absent. He then takes out a list, intending to pick the soldier who entered camp with the highest scores. After looking over the names, Brian calls out Damien's name and asks the group which one of them is Damien. At first, no one answers, so Brian assumes it might be Kyle because he looks stronger than the rest. However, Kyle's attitude is awful, and a leader needs character as much as ability. Still, Brian walks over to him and asks whether he is Damien. Before Kyle can answer, Damien speaks from behind them. Brian is surprised that the top recruit is not the muscle-bound one, so he turns around with curiosity. But the instant he sees Damien, he is completely stunned. He quickly checks the list again to confirm he did not read the name wrong. While scanning it, Brian asks Damien his age, and Damien calmly says he is 13. Before Brian can process how a 13-year-old outscored everyone, Kyle butts in with an unwanted remark. Looking down on Damien, he says a kid like him cannot lead them, since the army is not a playground. Brian immediately silences him, but Kyle refuses to back down or show any respect for authority. He steps closer and argues that appearance matters for a cadet platoon leader, since that person represents the entire platoon. Kyle points at Damien's face and claims discipline will fall apart if a kid like him takes charge. Damien had ignored the argument because the role seemed troublesome, but Kyle's insults finally sparked his competitive side. With a wicked grin, Damien instantly decides to teach the guy a lesson. Damien mocks him back, saying he would lead far better than a fool like Kyle, whose head seems packed with nothing but air and muscle. The sharp insult leaves Kyle furious. To make things worse for Kyle, Brian cuts him off without mercy. He grabs Kyle by the shoulder and firmly warns him never to insult his fellow recruits again. Kyle, who had been running his mouth moments earlier, now trembles like a soaked puppy under Brian's frightening stare as the warning lands hard. After being warned, Kyle says he understands, but Brian turns to Damien and admits that Kyle's point is not completely wrong. A cadet platoon leader must also have the presence to match the authority of the position. Kyle raises his hand to make a suggestion, nearly calling Damien a brat again before remembering Brian's warning and quickly correcting himself. He suggests a sparring match between himself and Damien, saying the winner should become cadet platoon leader because it would prove both strength and leadership. Brian asks Damien if he agrees to that arrangement, and Damien accepts without the slightest hesitation. Since things have reached this point, Damien decides to put these arrogant fools in their place and set the platoon's discipline straight. as if provoking Kyle on purpose. Damien says all he needs to do is crush that oversized lump of muscle, which makes Kyle burn with anger. Before Kyle can respond, Brian shouts to the others and asks if they accept the wager. The trainees all voice their agreement. Brian then orders everyone to follow him to the sparring arena, and the trainees quickly line up behind him. As soon as they arrive, Brian declares that the match will begin at once to decide the king of their little jungle. Before they start, Brian tells Kyle and Damien that the only rule is to stop the moment their opponent surrenders. He then asks whether both of them are ready. Once the two confirm that they are prepared, Brian gives the signal for the match to begin. Instead of attacking, Kyle stretches while bragging that he feels bad for picking on a young boy. Damien only chuckles and tells him to stop acting dramatic and come at him like a proper muscle lump. Angered by the insult, Kyle charges at Damien while still running his mouth, but Damien stays in place with his hands behind his back, as if watching a slow-moving lump approach. Even so, Damien admits Kyle is faster than expected, at least reaching a decent level compared to the soldiers from his previous life. Unfortunately for Kyle, that still is not enough against someone as quick as Damien. Completely calm, Damien slips past Kyle's fist with ease, thinking that a bag of muscle is no threat to him. Kyle is stunned that the kid he planned to put in his place dodged his punch, as if he had seen it coming from the start. Still, he refuses to stop and prepares another strike, sarcastically praising Damien for a cheap trick. Closing in again, Kyle declares that Damien will not dodge the next one. Damien dodges that attack as well, driving Kyle even further into rage, so Kyle decides his fists are not working. He switches tactics and tries to throw Damien down instead. Kyle rushes forward at once, but before he can grab Damien disappears from his sight. Kyle is shocked and wonders what kind of trick this is, only for Damien's voice to answer from behind him a moment later. Before Kyle can react, Damien strikes him from behind with enough force to leave him badly shaken. Kyle twists in pain, while Damien notes that such a blow is difficult for anyone to endure, because it was a direct hit infused with mana. Even after taking that powerful strike, Kyle somehow remains conscious, surprising Damien, who admits the muscly head is tougher than he looks. Refusing to lose to a kid, Kyle angrily threatens Damien and rushes in again, determined to have the final laugh. Unfortunately, he has challenged the wrong opponent, so Damien chooses to end the fight quickly with another mana-infused punch to the abdomen. Kyle cries out in pain and collapses onto the ground while Damien brushes off his hands and remarks that the big lump is finished. After dusting his hands off, he turns sternly toward the arrogant recruits who had looked down on him earlier and asks if anyone else wants to challenge him. None of them dares to answer. The trainees simply shake their heads in fear. Brian announces that the match is over and declares Damien the winner. He then officially confirms Damien as the new cadet platoon leader. Soon after, Kyle leaves the infirmary after having passed out earlier on the sparring ground. He returns to the trainee room in embarrassment, still unable to accept that he had to be carried all the way to the infirmary. Kyle tries to piece together what happened in the match, only to realize he remembers nothing after Damien's first punch. It seems the shock overwhelmed his mind, and his body kept moving even after he lost consciousness. He soon stops outside the trainee dorms, unable to face the shame of going back in. He had entered camp believing no one could rival him, so Kyle cannot understand how he lost so badly. After standing by the door for some time, he finally enters the room with his head lowered as everyone turns to look at him. Atmosphere grows even heavier when Kyle starts walking toward Damien's bed, making everyone panic. They whisper anxiously, wondering how to stop him before he gets sent to the infirmary again. Yet when the normally arrogant Kyle calmly says Damien's name, everyone realizes he has not come to start another fight. He drops to his knees and bows in defeat, accepting his loss with surprising dignity. Kyle even offers to follow Damien as his leader, leaving Damien completely stunned. Damien is baffled and wonders what happened to the proud musclehead from before. For a moment, he even suspects he may have damaged Kyle's brain without noticing. Kyle explains that his mind is perfectly fine, and respecting the strongest warrior is only natural. He says Damien is both the youngest and strongest opponent he has faced, surprising Damien further by begging to serve him. Damien is impressed to see that Kyle actually has manners and is not merely the thug he had assumed him to be. Damien then motions for him to stand, and tells him there is no need to use titles like leader. He tells Kyle to call him by name, then reaches out his hand in a gesture of friendship. Kyle gladly takes Damien's hand, clearly looking forward to spending more time together. A week passes after their enlistment into the army, and time seems to fly as Brian keeps pushing Damien's platoon through harsh training. The intense training makes it feel as if their days in camp are racing by, even though that is not really the case. After another tough session, Brian orders the trainees back to their dorms, except for Damien, whom he tells to follow him. Damien follows in silence, wondering where Brian is taking him and what he has in mind. A few minutes later, they reach the administrative office, and Damien wonders if an important announcement is about to be made. When he steps inside, he sees that the room is filled with other cadet platoon leaders. Realizing this, he relaxes at once and chooses to wait quietly for the announcement. Damien is minding his own business when a random guy starts mocking him for being young. Damien studies him silently and thinks his thin frame makes him resemble a praying mantis. Damien then compares him to Kyle and imagines how funny they would look side by side, given how completely different their builds are. The guy notices Damien staring and angrily asks why. Without hesitation, Damien says he was only wondering how far the man's eyes could stretch. Damien's sharp reply leaves the guy visibly shaken. Before he can fire back, an instructor steps onto the stage and tells the crowd to quiet down. Still irritated, the praying mantis mutters behind Damien, promising to deal with him later. The instructor explains that all cadet platoon leaders were summoned because of the upcoming interplatoon group battle. The competition will take place in a week and serve as an important midterm evaluation. He then tells every cadet platoon leader to guide their units and prepare properly for the assessment. After finishing the announcement, he dismisses them and sends them back to their dorms. On his way out, Damien finds the mantis dude waiting for him at the office door. The guy raises his fist, intending to teach Damien a lesson for talking back instead of quietly accepting insults from someone he considered superior. Before the mantis dude can act, another cadet leader steps in and scolds him for disrespecting a fellow platoon leader. He tells him to return to his platoon instead of causing trouble. The mantis dude tells him to stay out of it, but the other cadet refuses and reminds him that the outcome between them has not been decided yet. He then tells Damien to come with him and ignore the fool, and Damien agrees. Before leaving, however, Damien asks the mantis dude which platoon he belongs to. The mantis dude proudly says he is from the 4th platoon, but just as he starts to give his name, Damien cuts him off without interest and promises to deal with him during the upcoming group battle. While heading back, the kinder cadet calls Damien by name, making Damien wonder how he knows him. The man cheerfully explains that he heard about Damien's talent during the exam from Apple, who belongs to his platoon. The friendly cadet introduces himself as Gerard, the cadet platoon leader of the 3rd platoon. He says he looks forward to seeing Damien's skill in the group battle, and Damien accepts the challenge. A short while later, Damien returns to his platoon and calls for everyone's attention so he can share the announcement. Once everyone is focused, Damien informs them about the interplatoon battle that will be held in 1 week. He then declares that their unit, the 1st platoon, must claim first place no matter what. After making that declaration, Damien reminds them that among all the other platoons, they must make sure to defeat the 4th platoon completely. Above all, they need to overcome its cadet platoon leader, the praying mantis dude. As training moves into the 2nd week, the atmosphere across the training ground changes along with it. The instructor gathers the team to brief them on the competition. He explains that starting that week, they will learn formations essential for the upcoming battle. Although the event depends on teamwork, he adds that soldiers who excel individually will earn extra points, so everyone is expected to give their best. The team erupts in response, and Damien can clearly tell that the promise of extra points is an excellent motivator. After all, everyone wants a strong score, so they can enter their preferred branch more easily. The instructor tells the trainees they will study a military formation known as the wedge formation, an offensive tactic used to break through enemy lines. In simple terms, the formation works like a giant arrow with powerful force, but it has one weakness. If the vanguard falls, the rear follows, yet a strong spearhead can unleash tremendous power. For Damien's squad, they are fortunate to have Kyle, who is perfectly suited for the front position. The instructor tells the platoon to split into 2 groups, so they can begin practicing the formation. Damien takes command of one group and assigns Kyle to lead the other. Kyle grins at him and says he has no intention of losing. Once Damien's squad gathers around, he tells them he has a few tips about the formation. One of them asks in surprise whether he has done this before. Damien uses his usual excuse, saying his late father, who was a soldier, taught him. Damien then gives out the instructions, and his troops admit that the plan is genuinely solid. Because of that, they decide to put everything they have into it. Prepare, Damien orders the strongest men to line up behind him, while the shorter ones lift their shields and hold the outer flanks. He reminds them to keep their shields raised firmly above their heads. Damien studies the opposing side and notices that Kyle's team is built heavily around defense, but it does not shake him since he intends to break straight through. Damien shouts at full volume, telling his team they will settle the match with one decisive push. At that moment, the instructor announces the start of the match. Damien's men immediately begin advancing. Damien is surprised to see his team performing well, especially since this is their first attempt. He keeps driving them forward with firm encouragement. Just as they are about to collide with Kyle's team, Damien prepares to use mana, something he has avoided showing until now. The instant their shields meet, Damien strengthens his body with mana and pushes hard against his opponent. At the same time, he tells his men to press with him and target the gaps exactly as they planned. Damien's strategy is to strike at the openings and make the enemy panic. Just as he expected, his team slips into those gaps, throwing Kyle's side into confusion as they wonder who was supposed to block them. Before long, Damien and his men spot the opening they need. Using their spears, they disrupt the opposing team's balance. One after another, the opponents are sent down to the ground. Kyle is still shouting for them to stand when Damien closes in on him. Two lock shields, and Kyle tries to resist Damien's pressure, but Damien, as expected, drives him down with ease. Damien uses the moment to advise Kyle, saying his strength is remarkable, but he needs to learn how to use it more wisely. Meanwhile, the instructor watches the whole scene unfold, left speechless by Damien's performance. Though his body looks frail, the way he moves feels completely different, making it hard for Kyle to believe Damien is just another recruit. With the opposing leader taken down, the instructor ends the match and declares Damien's team the winner. Damien helps Kyle back to his feet, but Kyle vows that he will beat him next time. Instead of sinking into disappointment, Kyle and his squad immediately ask Damien to explain his tactics. They also want to know whether they can use the same method during the competition. Later, Damien notices the platoon members staying behind after regular daytime training to practice even more. Damien smiles, knowing that if they keep this up, the competition may no longer be a serious concern. While Damien watches his platoon train, the brats from the 4th platoon appear again and start mouthing off. They mock Damien and his squad, saying his men are useless, and that is why they follow a failure like him. Kyle and the others hear it, but they struggle to believe the insults are aimed at Damien. The 4th platoon squad leader repeats himself clearly, making sure everyone knows he is calling Damien a brat. He even adds that they are failures for choosing to follow someone like Damien. Damien is amazed that this shameless guy has come after him again, and he honestly wonders if the man is begging for trouble. Even so, Damien has no intention of reacting to such cheap provocation. He plans to silence them properly by crushing them in the squad competition. Damien is about to tell his platoon members to return to the barracks when Kyle and the others raise their voices, warning Platoon 4 that they will regret it once they meet in the competition. The entire squad is furious over the insults from the 4th platoon. They are eager to teach them a lesson when the competition finally begins. Without Damien needing to say anything, he is surprised to see the whole team fired up to face the 4th platoon. He decides this may be the best motivation they could have received. Later, Raymond, the camp's chief instructor, meets with the company. He reports to Burrus, the company commander of the camp. Raymond explains that this batch of trainees has promising talent, especially Damien and Apple, who stand out the most in the entire camp. Burrus asks what makes them special, and Raymond says that based on what he has seen, both Damien and Apple seem capable of manipulating mana. Burrus is shocked and asks if they come from noble families, but Raymond says both appear to be ordinary recruits. Burrus wonders how they learned mana at all, since the cost is usually far beyond commoners, and is mostly reserved for nobles. He checks the documents before him and sees that Damien enlisted after losing his parents, while Apple also has nothing particularly unusual listed. Burrus then recalls hearing about a disturbance among the units earlier and asks Raymond what happened. Raymond explains that the issue involved Damien, since the other squad leaders look down on him and think he is too young to command a squad. Raymond says Squad 1 became angry because their leader was insulted, and the incident seems to have brought them even closer together. Burrus is surprised to hear that the 1st platoon is holding their lead entirely because of this, so he decides to make things more interesting. When Raymond hears the plan, he worries it might backfire, but Burrus believes that if it does, then it only proves they were never suited for the task from the beginning. Burrus wants Raymond to raise the training intensity for both the 1st and 4th platoons to the maximum and push them to their limits. While they are discussing this, Kyle, as usual, senses hostility and gets that familiar uneasy feeling. After Burrus's orders are put into action, Damien's squad members begin to grow worried. Crawling drills have been added to their training, and the trainees feel the punishment is excessive just because they answered an insult. Kyle asks Damien if that is really the reason, especially now that crawling drills have been included in the regimen. Damien can clearly tell what they are trying to do. He takes it on himself to rally his squad, telling them that whether the training was made harder or not does not matter, since they did not come here to fool around. Still, he admits the crawling drill will be rough on their bodies. Yet if they handle it well, it will help them build more stamina than the other platoons. Hearing the conviction in Damien's voice, the squad members understand that slacking off is no longer an option. Damien tells them this training may feel difficult because it is their first attempt, but he promises to guide them so everyone can perform their best. One recruit asks if they are really expected to crawl across gravel, and Damien asks if he thought the training ground would come with a mattress. Kyle is startled by Damien's tone, saying he talks as though he has done this many times before, which of course he has. In his previous life, he had spent countless moments pressed against the ground, struggling just to survive. But survival practice is not the only reason crawling drills exist. Since their regular training is already draining, the instructors chose to add crawling drills on top of it. Once everyone is worn down and covered in scrapes and bruises, tension begins to crack the platoon because their nerves are already strained. In truth, the real purpose is to see how well they endure stress. The instructors want to compare which platoon holds together better, the first or the fourth. As squad leader, Damien has no intention of ignoring such an obvious trap, so he tells his comrades to take out their socks. The team members are confused and ask why they would need socks. Damien explains that he is about to show them how socks can save them during crawling drills. The following day, the first platoon arrives at the crawling drill area, where they meet the instructor in charge, Nielsen. Nielsen orders his assistant to get down and demonstrate the proper form. He explains that low crawling requires a soldier to lie flat with the spear held straight, then move quickly using the opposite hand and knee. Pointing at the obstacle ahead, he tells them they will use low crawling to pass through the course from that moment on, then asks if they are ready. The entire group shouts together that they are ready. Nielsen is surprised by their energy, especially compared to the 4th platoon. With that, he orders them to begin. The trainees slide under the barbed wire and start crawling across the rough ground, where traces from earlier attempts are still visible. Even Nielsen finds it strange that they are doing crawling drills in the 2nd week, since this training is normally scheduled for the 4th. He wonders what Barris is thinking, since crawling over gravel alone is painful enough to drain anyone. He expects them to have a hard time, but then he notices they have nearly cleared the entire obstacle course. Nielsen watches in disbelief, since this is supposed to be their first experience with crawling drills. He remains stunned until the 2nd group asks when they should begin, forcing him to order them to start right away. With eager expressions, they immediately dive into the course. Nielsen stands there baffled, thinking they look like starving berserkers from how fiercely they are moving. Damien notices Nielsen's shocked expression and knows the instructor never expected beginners to handle this drill so smoothly. After finishing the course, Kyle and the others hurry over to Damien and say it was surprisingly easy. In fact, they had to act like they were suffering. They admit the ground still hurt, but wrapping socks around their elbows and knees made a huge difference. The squad gathers around Damien, praising him as a genius. Since their crawling drill is now complete, they are supposed to return to the barracks. Kyle then asks Damien where he learned tricks like that. As usual, Damien says he learned it from his late father. However, he adds that his father also gave him one extra warning. That warning was never to get caught by the instructor. Kyle bursts out laughing and slaps Damien on the back, saying that warning is absolutely necessary. Damien wonders if Kyle is hitting him that hard as revenge for everything he put him through. Even so, Damien is relieved that crawling drills are now behind them, leaving only shield and spear training next. Damien is glad he can finally learn the kingdom's greatest spear art. Some dismiss it beside noble family techniques, but if mastered fully, it can stand equal to them. Most people simply quit after learning the basics. In his previous life, spear arts were his only path forward, so he clung to them desperately. After training as if his life depended on it, he achieved remarkable progress. It was during that period that he met the master who helped him improve even further. Thinking of his master, Damien wonders if he is still the same stubborn old man from back then, and hopes to meet him again soon. Just then, they run into the 4th platoon, who have also just finished their training. They are covered in bruises and complaining nonstop about how harsh the drill was. Their squad leader shouts for them to stop whining, but that only further irritates the already frustrated squad members. They snap back at him, telling him to watch his tone and not speak down to them just because he is the squad leader. Seeing this, the 1st platoon realizes they would have ended up the same way if not for Damien's clever idea. The 1st platoon bursts into laughter, leaving the 4th platoon confused over how they look perfectly fine after doing the exact same drill. Watching the 1st platoon laugh as though nothing happened, the 4th platoon's squad leader becomes furious and assumes they must have used some dirty trick. However, he is already planning to get even. He intends to do it during the platoon competition taking place in a few days. Soon enough, the day of the competition finally arrives. Once every platoon has gathered, they are told that the match bracket will be announced shortly. Kyle notices that something seems different about Damien, so he points it out to him. Damien jokes in response, asking Kyle if he has grown a little taller than before. The squad members burst into hearty laughter at his remark. However, it seems Kyle had actually been right, since he had noticed something unusual about Damien. As it turned out, Damien had advanced the Delph mana cultivation method to its second stage the night before, greatly increasing his mana reserves. Damien feels grateful that his time spent in the camp has not gone to waste at all. Damien then calls out to Kyle in a serious tone. He tells him that he wants their platoon to win by an overwhelming margin. Apparently, the top 5 soldiers in the platoon competition are rewarded with the right to choose any equipment they want from the armory. Most people would choose weapons or gear enchanted with one-time protection spells. To Damien, however, those items are worthless because they are only C rank at best. What Damien truly wants is a ring he once heard about from a subordinate in his past life who came from the 3rd training camp. The ring is said to possess a permanent special ability, meaning it is likely A rank or possibly even higher. Damien realizes he must win the competition and take first place to secure the ring. If Apple, who can use mana, chooses first, he may take it before Damien gets the chance. Damien asks Kyle whether he can handle the task he assigned him, and Kyle confidently says he can. Kyle then claps his hands together. He proceeds to tell the rest of the squad about Damien's determination. His words immediately light a fire under the squad and raise their spirits. Everyone agrees with Kyle that taking first place is only natural. Damien lets out a relieved sigh, seeing that the whole squad is already committed. The instructors then call the first platoon forward as they prepare to announce which platoon they will face. They explain that the competition is split into offensive and defensive formations, and after one match ends, both sides switch roles for a total of 2 rounds. If the offensive side fails to capture the enemy flag before time runs out, it is automatically counted as a loss. Damien's platoon is matched against the second platoon, with the second platoon attacking first, while the first platoon takes the defensive role. Damien tells his team to proceed exactly as they planned. He asks Kyle if he remembers the strategy. Damien had told him to push the men in front of him with all his strength once the signal came, and Kyle assures him that strength is his specialty. The match begins, and the second platoon immediately rushes forward. Yet the first platoon holds its ground firmly, leaving the second platoon with no opening to exploit. The second platoon grows frustrated because they cannot find even the smallest gap. The instructors are also surprised by the formation chosen by the first platoon, believing it is so rigid that it will not allow them to move properly. Then everything shifts the moment Damien gives the signal. The first platoon begins pushing forward with all their strength. The second platoon is completely stunned as they are forced backward. Before they can react, the second platoon ends up defending despite being assigned to attack. Suddenly, Damien calls Kyle's name and Kyle understands that it is time to go all out. Kyle shoves the man in front of him and sends him down. The opposing team is left shaken by what they just saw. Kyle then urges his teammates to line up shoulder to shoulder with him and keep pushing ahead. Their team continues, forcing the opponents back. The enemy squad leader is left wondering how Damien's team is coordinating so well. The instant Damien spots a gap in the opposing wall, he commands his team to charge straight through. Even the other platoon instructors are amazed and ask Brian if he gave them special training. Brian admits that he is just as surprised. Deep inside, Brian wonders how a squad with only basic training can move with such skill. In fact, they are already performing like elite soldiers with advanced training, and Brian knows Damien is the core of their impressive display. Damien continues giving commands, and the platoon responds to each one with remarkable speed. Brian realizes that the extra practice they always did after regular training has finally paid off. Brian smiles with pride. He had once worried about a child leading the platoon, but after seeing this, he knows it was the right decision. As the match goes on, Kyle locks onto his target, the flag bearer. He immediately shifts his full attention toward him. When the flag bearer sees Kyle approaching, fear freezes him as he shouts for his teammates to stop Kyle from advancing no matter what. His teammates quickly gather to form a wall in Kyle's path, but they soon notice something odd. Kyle is not moving at all, and he begins taunting them. He tells them they have finally stepped right into his trap. While they question what trap he means, Damien suddenly appears from behind Kyle. He uses Kyle's shoulder as a foothold. With that boost, Damien launches himself toward the opposing flag bearer hiding safely at the rear. Damien strikes him with his wooden spear and brings him down. At the same time, the time limit runs out, and because the attacking side failed to capture the flag, the first platoon wins. Damien stands confidently over the opposing flag bearer while his team celebrates their decisive victory behind him. The instructors announce a short break before the teams switch offensive and defensive roles. Impressed by what they witnessed, most of them believe the first platoon may sweep the tournament. Just then, one instructor argues that the first platoon might still face some difficulty. He points into the distance, drawing attention to another platoon that is performing exceptionally well. He tells his colleagues that with skill like that, the first platoon may finally face a serious challenge. It turns out that the platoon in question is the third platoon. They have completely dominated their opponents, making it look as though the other side had barely trained at all. The opposing leader tries to push his team into motion. However, his members are already exhausted and annoyed that their squad leader is standing far in the back, completely unaware of what they are enduring. At the rear stands Gerard, the third platoon leader, receiving guidance from Apple, who clearly knows what he is doing. Seeing the enemy worn out, Gerard thinks it is time to break through, but Apple stops him. Apple tells Gerard they only need to hold their position and wait for their opponents to fall apart. Gerard decides to trust Apple's judgment, though he cannot help wondering how someone so young can spot the enemy's weakness so easily. Even after spending around 2 weeks together, Gerard can plainly tell that Apple is far from an ordinary kid. Following Apple's advice, he orders his comrades to stay firmly in place. Before long, their opponents from the 4th platoon begin to grow frustrated. They shout at the 3rd platoon to stop standing there and come at them already. Even so, only a short while passes before things change. Gerard realizes that the 4th platoon has completely run out of strength. At once, he commands his men to advance on them. The 3rd platoon finally charges forward, forcing the 4th platoon to retreat. As the enemy stumbles back, Gerard calls for Apple to make his move. Apple then acts just as Damien would. He rushes straight toward the opposing side and unleashes a powerful mana-infused strike that breaks their formation apart. Their formation collapses, leaving the opposing squad leader deeply worried. If they are overwhelmed here, they will not even get the chance to face the 1st platoon. The guy glances sideways and notices Damien watching him. Damien can tell immediately that the match is already decided. Apple and his team soon overwhelm the enemy completely. Damien admits that Apple is no ordinary man and realizes he will be a difficult opponent to deal with. From that, Damien understands that the true match will be against the 3rd platoon. Although it will not be an easy fight, Damien feels no concern and even looks forward to facing Apple. Once the rest period ends, the instructor orders the platoons to gather on the training ground. Kyle reminds Damien that they are facing the 4th platoon next, and Damien confirms it. He says this is their opponent's final chance, so they must be desperate to earn even 1 point. Kyle says that only makes things more exciting, since he wants to beat the guy who called Damien a brat. Damien tells him to focus on clearing a path. Damien turns to his teammates and gives them a short speech, pointing out that their opponents are exhausted and their teamwork is nothing impressive. Even with those advantages, Damien says he has no plan to take it easy on the 4th platoon. His intention is to defeat them completely. The rest of the team agrees, saying they have been waiting for this moment, because the 4th platoon needs to answer for its insults. Damien urges his men to stay sharp, because their goal is to end the match before the 4th platoon can even respond. Just before the match begins, Damien looks into the opposing squad leader's eyes and sees clear fear there, while he himself smiles back. The instructors then officially announce the start of the match. Damien is surprised to see that the 4th platoon's square formation is a complete mess. He realizes they could break through easily with a simple charge. Still, he wants to finish the battle perfectly, making sure the 4th platoon never thinks about rising again. Damien then sends Kyle forward. Kyle charges eagerly into the enemy ranks. The opponents try to stop him, only to find themselves facing Kyle's overwhelming Hulk-like strength. Their squad leader shouts for his men to at least gather together and block Kyle. He is fully occupied giving orders to his team. Then Damien suddenly appears from above, descending toward him like a nightmare. As he drops in, Damien reminds him that he said he would remember what happened. Sweat rolls down the man's face as Damien knocks him to the ground with a kick. Instead of toning down his nasty attitude, he only acts even worse, convinced that this is merely a one-on-one fight against Damien. The man believes he has enough skill to defeat Damien, so he grabs his spear. He swings it at Damien with aggressive force. Damien, however, avoids the spear strike with ease. He even catches the spear while looking down on the man, asking if that is the best he can do. Before the man can react, Damien yanks the spear out of his hands, leaving him stunned. Damien drops his shield and moves in to teach him a lesson. He strikes him with the spear hard enough to make him cry out. The man collapses in pain and Damien stands over him with a terrifying presence, saying that dropping a weapon in battle is no different from inviting disaster. Damien tells him to remember that advice, because it could save his life someday. Damien then channels mana into his fist and lands a heavy punch that leaves the man coughing hard. The man loses consciousness from a single blow, and Damien feels disappointed by how dull the victory was. The 4th platoon's instructor rushes over to check on him. Since the 4th platoon no longer has the strength or ability to continue, the victory automatically goes to the 1st platoon. The 1st platoon lifts their weapons high in celebration. Kyle admits that the whole experience felt incredibly satisfying. The platoon praises Damien as the key force behind their victory, while the 4th platoon is left wondering how he has enough skill to defeat them so thoroughly. By now, the instructors have no choice but to acknowledge Damien as a prodigy, and one even says he may be more impressive than they are. Others agree, but just then, a crushing aura rises behind them. Along with it comes a frightening voice asking whether something interesting is happening. They turn around in shock and see a man with an eye patch staring them down. He is Leon Hark Belkane, the intimidating training instructor of the 3rd Division. The instructors instantly straighten up and salute Leon Hark in greeting. Leon Hark then asks Brian if Damien is the boy he mentioned earlier. Leon Hark points at Damien, who is being tossed around by his teammates in celebration, and Brian confirms that he is the one. Hearing this, Leon Hark smiles and says it seems an interesting person has finally joined them. Later that day, Damien and the others are gathered inside the barracks. One of their comrades suddenly rushes in and tells them that a VIP visited the camp during the match. He says the man is apparently considered a legend among the other instructors. Damien becomes interested at once and asks the man what the VIP's name is. The man stumbles over the name, but Damien eventually understands what he is trying to say. Damien finishes it for him, saying he must be talking about Leon Hark. The man immediately confirms that this is the name. Damien's eyes brighten with excitement, and to everyone's surprise, he suddenly rushes out of the room. They call after him and ask where he is going, but Damien does not answer. That is because he wants to confirm what he heard with his own eyes. Just then, he runs into Leon Hark and Brian in the hallway. Leon Hark recognizes him as the boy Brian had been talking about. Brian tells Damien that they were actually on their way to see him. Before Brian can even finish speaking, Damien snaps into attention and salutes Leon Hark. In Leon Hark's presence, Damien seems like an entirely different person. Damien finally confirms that the 3rd Division is linked to the 3rd training camp. Still, he never expected to meet Leon Hark here, since the camp is so far away. Damien looks at Leon Hark as though he has found a savior, because Leon Hark is none other than his master, the man who greatly shaped his life. It turns out Leon Hark came specifically to see Damien after hearing so much about him. Now that they are face to face, Leon Hark can tell that Damien has mastered a proper mana cultivation method. Leon Hark says he watched Damien's spear techniques earlier and found them impressive, then asks whether Damien already has a unit in mind after training. Damien answers without hesitation, saying he wants to join the Neocalit's unit. Both Leon Hark and Brian are shocked by his answer, and Leon Hark asks if he truly means what he just said. Neocalit's is one of the 3 units under the 3rd Division, assigned to suppress monsters in Bronzerian Forest. It is known as the harshest and deadliest unit, with heavy losses every year. Leon Hark asks why Damien wants such a brutal unit, when most recruits prefer comfortable royal administrative posts. Damien simply says he can grow stronger there. Leon Hark offers to write him a recommendation for the Night Order instead, shocking Brian, because that path is usually reserved for nobles. Damien refuses the offer, saying his decision is already made. In truth, he wants to meet someone in Neocalit's, which is why he joined the 3rd Division at all. Since Damien will not change his mind, Leon Hark accepts his choice and tells him to return to his room and rest. Brian, however, is deeply worried and scolds Damien, asking if he understands what he just turned down. With Leon Hark's recommendation, he had a rare chance to enter the noble-only Night Order. Brian worries about Damien's future and asks Leon Hark to reconsider, saying he will persuade Damien again. Leon Hark asks whether Brian truly thinks Damien cannot decide for himself. He tells Brian that he clearly missed the look in Damien's eyes during their conversation. Damien's gaze was firm and filled with determination, but only makes Leon Hark even more curious about Damien's background. Leon Hark tells Brian not to interfere with Damien's choice and to let him be. Since Damien is joining the 3rd Division, their paths will naturally cross again. The next day, before the match between the 3rd and 1st platoons, Damien tells his men to give their best, since the 3rd platoon is clearly no pushover. Even so, he assures them that no platoon in the training camp can defeat them as they are now. Damien then urges his unit to come together and crush the 3rd platoon just as they have done to the others. A short while later, the match begins. The 1st platoon immediately forms up, and Gerard recognizes it as the same formation they used against the 4th platoon the previous day. Apple agrees that the formation is solid, while Gerard tells him his role will be crucial in this fight. Apple agrees without hesitation. Gerard gives the order for his men to charge. Soon, the two sides crash into each other. Damien also gives commands from the rear. He tells his men to drive the 3rd platoon back as both sides press fiercely against each other. Gerard realizes that the 1st platoon is using the same method they relied on the day before. Suddenly, the 3rd platoon opens its formation and reveals Apple. Damien is completely caught off guard by the move. At that moment, Apple lands a decisive blow against the 1st platoon's formation. The instant he does, Gerard orders his men to advance. However, Kyle steps in to block their path. Using 2 shields together, he stops their advance, leaving the 3rd platoon stunned and wondering where Kyle's tremendous strength came from. Damien had already grown uneasy when Apple made his move, and he realizes they only survived because Kyle managed to stop them. Through this, Damien sees just how impressive Apple is, since he nearly broke through their shield bearer with a single strike. Kyle holding the line, Apple's opening plan is left stalled. Apple is frustrated that he has to face someone as absurdly strong as Kyle. Apple also realizes the situation has become troublesome since Kyle is now completely locked onto him. Before the match, Damien had instructed Kyle to focus entirely on Apple no matter what. He explained that if Kyle could hold Apple back, no one else in their ranks could break through. Kyle had not even known who Apple was, but Damien told him he would recognize him the moment he saw him. Now, in the middle of the clash, Kyle finally understands exactly who Apple is. With the plan suddenly disrupted, Gerard has no choice but to ask Apple if he can break through, and Apple says he must find a way no matter what. He knows he cannot defeat Damien by depending on raw strength alone. Apple channels mana into his spear. Then he charges at Kyle, landing a heavy blow that shakes through the shield and into Kyle's body. Everyone is amazed that Kyle manages to block it, admitting his endurance is impressive. Still, Apple intends to keep striking until Kyle finally gives way. He pounds against Kyle's shield with relentless force and intensity. Pressure makes Kyle wonder how someone his age can possess such strength. That moment, Apple cracks through Kyle's shield, and just as he prepares to land the decisive strike, Damien steps in and blocks Apple's attack with his mana-coated shield. The two glare at each other like true rivals, but the whistle sounds, and the third platoon loses the round for failing to capture the enemy flag before time runs out. Apple is frustrated by the loss and shocked that Kyle endured his assault. He had planned to finish things quickly, but Kyle disrupted everything. As Kyle lies on the ground breathing hard, Damien asks if he is alright, and Kyle's pride makes him insist he is fine. Damien then tells him to stay in the rear for the second half, shocking Kyle, who protests that nothing is broken. Damien reminds him that 2 weeks of training still remain, and overdoing it now could ruin his progress. Instead, he assigns Kyle to guard the center flag, and says he is trusting him with it. Deep down, Kyle understands that Damien is protecting his pride while pretending to scold him. He knows the flag barely matters this round, because they are the attacking side. Even so, Kyle takes the flag and heads back, assuring Damien that no one will take it, so Damien can focus on crushing their opponents. That settled, the instructor orders both platoons to switch positions. Before the match begins, Damien gives his team a brief speech. He admits they are tired, but reminds them this is the final round and says he does not want them using the full time limit. He tells them to seize the enemy flag within 5 minutes and end the match as quickly as possible. As both platoons get ready for the final showdown, Damien silently sets a personal goal for himself. In the earlier matches, he had already shown everything he could as a platoon leader cadet. Now, Damien wants to leave a stronger impression on the instructors by displaying his own individual skill. This match against the third platoon is the perfect stage, especially with a powerful contender like Apple present. Defeating them would nearly secure Damien the title of outstanding trainee. Damien notices Apple plans to guard the flag himself after spending too much stamina in the first half. Holding the front line the way he did before will not be easy. Even so, Damien knows a direct confrontation with Apple is unavoidable before this battle ends. Soon, the instructor orders the first platoon to attack and the third platoon to defend. As the final round begins, the air grows tense as everyone prepares to fight hard for the grand prize. Damien tells his team they will give everything from the start, ordering them to stay focused and follow his lead. Once they confirm his command, the team surges forward like a raging bull, startling the third platoon. Their opponents are baffled by how fast Damien's team moves without breaking formation. Gerard warns his team that Damien's platoon must not be underestimated and orders them to raise their shields. Just as he prepares to warn them to watch the enemy leader, Damien suddenly appears right in front of them, making their attempt to track him completely useless. He pours mana into his spear, aiming to pierce through their defense with a single decisive move. Once the spear is infused with mana, he immediately attacks the front line. He breaks through the third platoon's shield formation with ease. As they struggle to hold their position, Damien keeps maneuvering the mana-filled spear, forcing them apart and breaking open their defense. After creating a path, Damien shouts for his platoon to push through. The third platoon desperately tries to stop them, but their defense is already falling apart. Seeing this, the third platoon members decide to focus all their efforts on stopping Damien, sending several spears toward him at once. Before they can properly react, Damien slips past them with ease. Their spears collide together, hitting nothing but empty space. After completely breaking the third platoon's first defensive line, Damien orders his team to regroup at once. In an instant, the first platoon reforms directly in front of the third platoon. Gerard is stunned, trying to understand how they closed the distance so quickly, but Apple ignores the platoon and reminds him that Damien is the true target. Apple says that as long as Damien is contained, the first platoon will never be able to steal their flag. Apple then decides to handle Damien himself, handing the flag to Gerard and telling him to protect it. it. Gerard feels uneasy, and part of him also feels ashamed that he must rely on someone younger than everyone else. Meanwhile, Damien cannot shake the uneasiness rising in him as he watches Apple step onto the battlefield for their final clash. He is about to face the future Grand General, Apple Van Striel, a figure he could only admire from below in his previous life. Soon, Apple leaps forward to attack, while Damien braces himself for the most important face-off of his life. Damien knows this is his chance to test himself against a legendary figure like Apple. When Damien dodges quickly, he realizes Apple's first attack was only a feint meant to force him into moving. While Damien is distracted, Apple strikes again, but Damien sees through the trick just as the real attack is about to land. Damien blocks the strike with his spear, catching Apple off guard. The two of them pause, each waiting to see who'll move next. In silence, Damien urges Apple to take the fight seriously. After all, Damien intends to put everything he has into this battle, and he immediately springs forward to attack. Apple, however, manages to defend against the strike. Damien gives him no chance to recover and quickly follows up with another attack. Apple blocks again, but this time Damien's mana-filled spear nearly breaks his own. The sheer force behind Damien's mana leaves Apple genuinely shocked. For a moment, Apple wonders whether Damien is truly a commoner or someone with a special background like his own. Damien gives him no time to think and keeps attacking. As the pressure continues, Apple starts wondering how Damien can control mana so skillfully. He finds it absurd to encounter such a ridiculous mana freak in a remote training camp like this. After forcing Apple back again and again, Damien finally stops and declares that it is time to finish the fight. He gathers his mana for one more strike, confidently stating that Apple will not be able to block the next attack. Just as Damien said, the blow catches Apple off guard and shatters his spear completely. The impact also sends Apple flying back, knocking him hard onto the ground. As Apple grips his chest in pain, Damien moves without delay and rushes straight toward the enemy camp to claim their flag. Apple struggles to move while his mind stays fixed on the flag. Through his blurred vision, he can still make it out in the distance. Unfortunately for him, Damien takes the flag with ease and declares victory for the erst platoon. Apple can only watch, unable to stop him. After securing the flag, Damien returns and helps Apple stand, praising him for a strong fight. Apple congratulates him in return, but swears he will not lose the next time they clash. Damien, however, hopes that next time they fight together rather than standing on opposite sides. He jokes that he might not be able to beat Apple again if they have a rematch. Apple tells him not to exaggerate, and Damien watches him leave with mixed emotions. He cannot believe he defeated the future legendary general, yet he also senses this defeat may push Apple to become even stronger than before. For the moment, Damien chooses to enjoy the victory instead of worrying that Apple may surpass him someday. Soon, the members of the first platoon gather around him, cheering loudly. From a distance, Raymond watches their celebration and silently vows to make sure the trainees finish their final 2 weeks with the same strength they showed today. Leon Hark agrees, though he suggests letting them enjoy the sweetness of their victory for now. As a reward for winning, the first platoon is served a meal far better than anything they ever expected to see in camp. Steak, chicken, and all kinds of delicious dishes fill the dining table, making the team realize that winning the competition was truly worth it. They start eating almost immediately. Though completely worn out, they still find the strength to rush toward the food, and Damien understands, since meat is not something they get every day. Damien looks around and notices that Leon Hark has already left, making him sincerely wish he had been able to speak with his master a little longer. Just then, the instructor appears beside their table. He asks Damien whether he still stands by yesterday's decision, and Damien replies that he has not changed his mind. The instructor tries once more to persuade him. He mentions that Leon Hark made Apple the same offer, and it was clear that Apple accepted it. Damien says he respects Apple's choice, but this is his own life, and he intends to live it the way he wants. Hearing that, the instructor scoffs and decides that Damien is truly a stubborn kid. By now, he understands that Damien's mind cannot be changed. The instructor raises his wine glass and toasts the trainees, telling them to prepare themselves, because they must keep training hard to reach their goals. At the same time, he silently wishes Damien success on whatever path he chooses. The rest of the team lifts their glasses as well, pledging their unity to the kingdom. Before they realize it, time passes quickly, and they soon enter the final week of training. Damien notices that the trainees' attitudes have changed during this period, and the change is not limited to his own squad. In fact, the entire third training camp has improved, proving that the squad competition served as a powerful spark. During one training break, Kyle approaches Damien and asks if he has heard what happened to the fourth platoon. Apparently, their morale has collapsed since the squad competition, and their dropout rate has become shockingly high. Kyle says their squad leader was the first to run away after the competition ended, and Damien expresses disappointment in the man. Just then, Damien tells Kyle and the others that there is still something they need to worry about. He explains that while they may have secured a strong group score, anyone aiming for a good placement must also care about individual results. Damien knows everyone wants to enter the royal palace since it is every commoner's dream. However, among 160 recruits, only 30 are allowed to apply. To make matters worse, only 1/3 of those applicants will actually be accepted in the end. Kyle admits the competition is fierce, and Damien says that is exactly why most people in the camp enlisted in the first place. At that moment, Kyle grabs Damien and asks whether he is also aiming for a royal administrative position like the rest of them. Damien tells Kyle he has no intention of going to the royal palace, prompting Kyle to ask why, since Damien's score could easily earn him a high-ranking post. Damien asks whether Kyle truly wants to become a royal administrative soldier, reminding him that the role would keep him inside the palace all day. Kyle admits it would be tiring, but since it is the best assignment available, he believes accepting it is only natural. Damien assures Kyle that someone like him would not last a month in the royal palace before trying to escape. He reminds him that Kyle enjoys using his strength, so palace life would only bore him. Kyle then asks Damien where he plans to go instead. Damien says he will be heading to Neocolitz. The instant Damien says that, the whole squad bursts into chaos. Kyle turns back to the others and declares that Damien has completely lost his mind. Damien responds by kicking him in the leg, forcing Kyle to accept his decision. Kyle immediately changes his attitude. He praises Damien for being insane, saying that is exactly why he likes him. Break time over, the trainees are ordered to get back to training. Not long after, the day of discharge arrives, and all the trainees gather together. Burrus stands before them to deliver a speech, urging them to keep improving after leaving camp so they can serve the kingdom well. Trainees listen carefully, salute Burrus, and pledge their unity with the kingdom. Once Burrus finishes speaking, Raymond steps forward to announce the top 5 trainees. As everyone expected, Damien takes the number 1 position. Damien smiles with satisfaction, knowing he accomplished what he came to do. Second place goes to Apple. After him come Kyle, Gerard, and Alex, the leader of the second platoon. Raymond then tells the 5 to follow him, explaining that each of them will receive 1 piece of equipment from the armory as a reward. When they arrive at the armory, he says they may each choose 1 item inside, starting with the top-ranked trainee, Damien. Damien steps inside eagerly, since this is exactly what he has been waiting for. Once he enters, he is impressed by how neatly everything is arranged. As Damien looks around, he wonders whether there are any hidden treasures he never knew about. After searching for a while, he decides there is nothing especially important, so he should simply take the ring he came for. As he approaches it, Damien realizes the rumors were true, because he has been unable to look away from the ring since entering. Damien finally takes the ring into his possession. It is said to release a brief invisibility spell when mana is poured into it. Damien knows Apple is the only one among the top 5 who would have noticed the ring, since Apple is the only other trainee able to use mana. After Damien claims the ring and steps out, Apple is told to enter and choose his own reward. Since Damien has taken the item Apple chose in his previous life, he grows curious about what Apple will select this time. A short while later, Apple comes out holding something unusual, and Damien is surprised by how quickly he finished. Then Damien notices the item in Apple's hands, and his expression immediately changes. Kyle catches his reaction and asks what is wrong, but Damien tells him it is nothing. It turns out that Apple has chosen a seal. The seal bears the crest of a kingdom that collapsed long ago. Damien had always wondered how Apple learned to use mana. This makes him suspect that Apple may have some connection to that fallen kingdom. Once everyone has chosen an item, Raymond closes the armory door. As Raymond turns around, Apple's selection catches his attention. He asks if Apple knows what he picked, and Apple says he chose it because he sensed divine power from it. Raymond confirms that the seal does contain a trace of divine power, since it was once imbued with the ability to ward off misfortune. He also praises Gerard for choosing a fine spear and Kyle for selecting a shield made by the artisan Walter. When Raymond looks at Damien, he asks if he is truly satisfied with just that ring. Raymond says it only reduces body weight, leaving Damien surprised because he only knew about the ring's invisibility effect. Raymond then suggests that Damien put it on and test it. The moment he wears it, Damien feels his body grow lighter, allowing him to move much faster than usual. After Damien tests it, Raymond asks for his opinion, and Damien assures him the ring is even better than he expected. With both invisibility and weight reduction, Damien is certain he chose well, and the ring is clearly an A-rank artifact. Since everyone is pleased with their choice, Raymond orders them to return and apply for their preferred postings. A little later, they sit inside an office while Raymond hands out forms for them to choose their assignments. Damien selects the Neocolitz unit without a moment of hesitation. Raymond is disappointed that Damien still has not changed his mind. He says Damien could excel in the Night Order, yet the boy seems determined to choose a deadly path. After completing the form, Damien hands it back to Raymond. Raymond warns him to be careful, since the Neocolitz unit is extremely dangerous, and Damien thanks him for his concern. Raymond pats Damien's head and praises his hard work over the past month. He says Damien can leave once the notices arrive in a few days, and Damien thanks him again before departing. Outside the office, Damien feels conflicted about finally heading to Neocalitz. He has awaited this for so long, yet now that it is near, excitement and unease rise together. Suddenly, Apple bursts out angrily after hearing about Damien's chosen posting. He demands to know why Damien would not choose the Night Order with his abilities. Damien calmly replies that the Night Order is not where he belongs. Frustrated, Apple reveals that he chose the Night Order, and even received a recommendation letter from Leon Hark. Damien praises his decision, telling Apple that he will do well in the Night Order. Apple does not feel reassured, since Damien rejected that same option yet calls it wise. He then tells Damien that he is truly hard to predict. After that, Apple reminds him that Neocalitz is a dangerous place and tells Damien to look after himself. The two then shake hands and promise that they will meet again someday. After their emotional farewell, Apple leaves. Watching him go, Damien wonders if Apple knows he is destined to become a Grand General of the Baroque Kingdom. Still, after their duel, Damien feels Apple may surpass even the man he became in the previous life. He looks forward to the future Great General Apple. Setting that thought aside, Damien decides to return to his platoon and say his farewells. A short while later, he reaches the dorm, where the boys are packing to leave, and Kyle immediately steps in his way. It seems Kyle thought Damien was about to leave without saying goodbye. Damien assures him he planned to do so, since none of them knows when they will meet again. Kyle says Damien will see him sooner than expected, leaving Damien puzzled by what he means. Setting that aside, Kyle brings Damien to the middle of the room and calls for everyone's attention, saying Damien wants to give his farewell message. Damien begins by praising the team for their hard work. He thanks them for following him, and tells them to keep giving their best in their assigned units. The boys cheer together, thanking Damien for everything he has done. They hope to meet again someday, and Damien wishes them all well. After finishing his farewell speech, Damien gets ready to leave the camp. Then a voice suddenly catches his attention. It turns out to be Dianol Work, who greets Damien with a bright smile. Afterward, the two head to the Hamel Guild so she can update Damien on the progress of his investment. There, Dianol hands him documents showing how the investment funds were used and explains that, under his terms, his expected return is 3% of the net revenue. After looking over the papers, Damien is impressed by Dianol's careful work and how neatly she arranged the breakdown for him to follow. Once he finishes reading the report, Dianol invites him to ask questions, but Damien says such a clear report leaves him with nothing to ask. He tells her to proceed exactly as they discussed and adds that someone will soon deliver the insurance money under his name. Dianol wants Damien to sign a formal contract with her, but he refuses because he trusts her. He explains that contracts are only necessary when trust is lacking, and he fully believes Dianol can handle everything without one. Dianol is surprised by his response and comments that Damien is truly an unusual person. Soon after, an employee arrives with a small box containing the investment money, and Damien tells Dianol to check the funds. However, the moment she opens it, Dianol is stunned. The promised amount was 300 gold, yet the box contains more than 500 gold. Since the funds have increased, Dianol tries to revise their agreement, especially Damien's returns, but Damien stops her. He explains that the extra money is his thanks for treating him like a proper adult instead of an inexperienced child, while explaining the investment process. With that settled, Dianol asks Damien where his main unit will be stationed now that he has graduated from training camp. Damien tells her he is heading west to the Neocalitz unit near the Brunserian forest. Dianol is shocked and asks if he volunteered for such a posting. Damien simply asks whether anyone could force the top trainee to go against his will. He jokes that she should not worry, since the investment money will be hers if he dies. Dianol does not take the joke well and sharply tells him to stop saying that. Damien is startled by her sincerity, having thought she was merely a sweet lady. Seeing her anger now, he realizes she can be surprisingly sharp at times. Dianol asks Damien when he plans to leave, and Damien answers that his departure is set for 3 days from now. Dianol then gets ready to go, assuring Damien that his investment will be used wisely. Now that the investment matter is settled, Damien chooses to enjoy the next 3 days before leaving, knowing he'll soon be stuck in a miserable forest. Over the following days, Damien indulged in food and drink as much as he wanted, even ending up sleeping on the street at one point. 3 days passed, and the time finally came to set out for the Neocalitz unit. Damien checks his belongings once more, making sure he has packed everything necessary for the trip. Just when he is about to head out, Kyle suddenly shows up with his luggage, reminding Damien that he promised they would meet again soon. Damien immediately understands what Kyle is planning. With a bright grin, Kyle throws an arm around Damien's shoulder and says he is not ready to let their training camp bond end. He then admits he also requested assignment to the Neocalitz unit. Kyle confidently says that since they performed well together in training, he He expects their teamwork to continue. Damien never wanted to drag anyone into Neocalitz's dangers, yet having someone familiar beside him brings quiet relief. Just as they are about to leave, a voice calls from behind, telling them to wait. They turn back and see Dionel breathing hard, clearly grateful that she managed to arrive in time. Damien is completely caught off guard by her appearance and asks what brought her here. Dionel explains that she heard the Neocalitz unit is located far from civilization, so she arranged a carriage to support Damien's journey. She explains that the carriage is packed with rations and supplies for when he reaches his destination. Damien is stunned by her kindness and can only ask why she went so far for him. Imitating the gesture Damien once used when speaking of repaying kindness, she tells him this is no different from how he returned her generosity. In simple terms, she is doing the same. She explains that the Hamel merchant group always repays its debts, so she spent the past 2 days securing the carriage for him. Even Kyle is amazed by how much effort Dionel has put into making things easier for our boy. Once everything is settled, Damien gets ready to depart, and Dionel wishes him a safe journey. Damien and Kyle climb into the carriage and begin their trip toward the Neocalitz unit. Before long, Kyle starts feeling sick from the rough road and the bleak sights around them. Damien admits that walking this route would have been truly awful. Still, it seems they have reached Urkel, as a garrison comes into view. Kyle then says he is surprised they have not seen a single local since arriving. Damien answers that the locals are probably hiding from monsters, or staying within the Bronzerian forest. Apparently, most people living in Urkel earn their living by gathering an herb, called a mancho, from inside the Bronzerian forest. In simple terms, a mancho is a poisonous plant that causes intense fever and stomach trouble. However, when handled properly, it becomes the key ingredient for a powerful painkiller. The Bronzerian forest provides more than 60% of the kingdom's Amancho supply, leaving the locals with little choice but to take dangerous risks. A short while later, they arrive at the base. Kyle's excitement begins to fade the moment he sees how grim the base looks. He asks Damien if anyone truly lives there, since the building looks like it might fall apart with a touch. At that moment, Damien catches the smell of blood. He warns Kyle to brace himself because someone is approaching. From within the thick fog, a group of soldiers appears. They look as though life has worn them down completely. Men pass by them with bruised bodies, battered appearances, and cold, guarded expressions. As they vanish into the distance, Kyle asks Damien why all of them look like ghosts. Damien sighs and tells Kyle he needs to get used to sights like this. He explains that these soldiers face deadly battles almost every day. This makes Damien recall a scene from his past life, when he once addressed the soldiers under his command. He had asked them what a soldier's most important duty was. They gave all kinds of answers, from crushing enemies to similar ideas. One even said a soldier should take down as many enemies as possible before falling. That answer earned him a knock on the head, and he immediately demanded to know why he was the one punished. Damien told him his answer was the worst of them all. Then he explained to his men that the most important duty was staying alive, told them never to waste their lives, and that they had to survive and return no matter what it took. He added that they needed to grow stronger so they would not fall, and his men accepted his words. Remembering it now, Damien finds the memory bitterly ironic, because in the end, all of them still lost their lives. Damien then tells Kyle it is time to go inside, but Kyle hesitates. Damien reminds him why they came here in the first place. They are here to become stronger, so standing outside like statues will accomplish nothing. Kyle is about to voice more worries, but Damien simply walks ahead and leaves him behind, forcing Kyle to hurry after him. Meanwhile, the soldiers returning from the battlefield are furious over their losses. The garrison had described the enemy as a small orc unit, but they actually encountered a disciplined force. Most of the men in this unit are apparently there because of court-martial sentences, meaning they do not even have the freedom to leave. Their only choices are to spend their lives wasting away in a cell or survive in this unit by any means possible. It seems one of them, Charleston, has nearly lost the use of his arm. Thereon, the unit commander and a genuinely kind man suggests requesting a priest from the temple. One soldier reminds Terran that priests demand outrageous fees, far more than their salaries could possibly cover. That moment, Terran takes out a pouch holding 20 gold coins and tells them to use it for the cost. The soldiers are stunned, since that money was meant for his mother's surgery. Terran insists her condition has improved somewhat, so the operation is not urgently needed. Seeing just how selfless their commander is, every soldier in the room begins offering what they can as well. Even Dionel, one of the rookies, steps forward and says he will contribute too. The others try to talk him out of it, but he insists Charleston was hurt because of him. The commander's eyes fill with tears as he calls him an admirable little brother. brat. One of the soldiers then hurries away to bring a priest from the temple. Taran approaches Dianel and asks how old he will turn that year. When Dianel says he will be 18, Taran reminds everyone that a full year has already passed since Dianel enlisted, and as long as Charleston manages to survive, Dianel will no longer be treated as the newest recruit. Just then, a soldier tells Taran that the new recruits he mentioned arrived a short while ago. The moment everyone hears that fresh recruits have come in, the atmosphere shifts. Taran says the brutal battle had made him completely forget about their arrival. Taran then calls Dianel over. He tells him it is time to go take a look at his juniors. Not long after, Damien and Kyle stand before their commander, Taran, who studies the two of them closely. Taran decides Kyle seems fairly capable with a sturdy and reliable build, but when he looks at Damien, he cannot understand why a child is in such a dangerous place. He asks Damien's age to make sure there is no mistake, and Damien confirms he is 13. Taran cannot grasp why someone so young would willingly volunteer for this place, especially when Damien is 5 years younger than Dianel, the youngest soldier in the unit. As Taran voices his thoughts about Damien, Kyle tells him that Damien actually ranked first when he graduated from training camp. Taran, however, is not impressed, saying first place means nothing in a place like this. He reminds them that training camp and the Neoclitz unit are completely different worlds. Damien still tells Taran that he understands the difference between the two places. Yet Taran remains confused about why Damien came here despite knowing exactly what kind of place it is. Setting that matter aside, Taran calls for Dianel. He orders him to assign Damien and Kyle their bunks and place them on cleaning duty. Dianel then tells the two of them to follow him. On the way to the dorms, he explains that the Neoclitz unit has no formal ranks. Taran is the commander, and below him is the vice commander. Beneath those two, however, seniority depends only on who joined the unit earlier. A few minutes later, they reach the dorms. The room is a filthy mess when they enter, and Dianel tells them to pick any locker since they probably will not use it for long. Confused by that comment, Kyle asks what he means. Dianel calmly says he has been in the camp for a year and is still the youngest, so Kyle should figure out the meaning himself. Unfortunately, Kyle is bad at math and nearly responds with sarcasm, but Dianel instantly kicks him in the shin to put him back in line. As Kyle grabs his aching shin, Dianel explains coldly that his words mean everyone who arrived after him has already fallen. As Dianel turns to leave, he says he will explain the rest later. For now, he orders them to unpack their belongings and clean the barracks right away. After he leaves, Kyle mutters curses at Dianel, while Damien quietly laughs as though the whole exchange entertained him. Kyle soon notices and asks what he finds so funny. Damien quickly straightens his expression and says it is nothing. Then, with excitement, he remarks that this place feels as if it has not changed at all. After that, Damien tells Kyle they should begin cleaning. Kyle is stunned, unable to believe Damien plans to accept such obvious hazing without complaint. Damien, however, does not seem bothered in the slightest. If anything, he appears strangely eager to clean every corner. Damien cheerfully hands Kyle a rag and says they must do the job properly because this is their first mission. He even declares with enthusiasm that they should clean it well enough for someone to lick the floor. Kyle is horrified and asks if Damien thinks he is some kind of vacuum cleaner. Meanwhile, at the Neoclitz unit's military store, Dianel waits for the storekeeper to finish his order while thinking about the new recruits. Dianel feels no excitement about having juniors, because losing so many of them has left a painful mark on him. At some point, he simply stopped getting close to the newcomers, because once he grew attached to them and wanted to keep them safe, they would suddenly disappear on the battlefield before he could do anything. For that reason, Neoclitz has become the kind of place where no one truly lasts, and only loss remains behind. After watching rookies arrive and vanish again and again, Dianel hardened his heart and stopped caring for them, believing they would be gone soon anyway. Still, something about Damien and Kyle keeps nagging at him, especially Damien. The way Damien looked at him during their first meeting made Dianel feel as if Damien already knew him. Just then, the storekeeper's voice brings him back, saying his shoe sole repair is finished. Dianel thanks him and reaches for the shoes, but the storekeeper asks about the two clueless fools who passed by earlier. He guesses they are the new recruits, and Dianel confirms it. The man says he knew it the moment he saw them. He also comments that Damien and Kyle looked hopeless, so they must be Dianel's juniors. After a short silence, Dianel takes his shoe and heads out to check on his so-called juniors. On the way, he decides he should break their spirits first. In Neoclitz, motivation, confidence, and pride only make people last for a shorter time. Soon after, he reaches the dorm entrance. Just before opening the door, Dianel hopes they have not failed at something as basic as cleaning. But the moment he steps inside, Diurnal is completely stunned to see the room shining clean, with Damien looking as cheerful as if cleaning were his true calling. While Diurnal remains frozen, several other soldiers arrive and are just as surprised by the spotless room. One even asks how harshly Diurnal drilled the rookies to make the barracks look brand new. Diurnal starts to panic, stumbling over his words as he tries to explain that he did not do anything, making things even more unsettling. Damien walks up with a bright smile and reports that the cleaning duty is complete. Still smiling, he asks Diurnal to inspect it and see whether it meets his standards. This only makes Diurnal more anxious, because rookies usually complain and barely pretend to clean. Yet Damien and Kyle have made the entire place spotless. Diurnal then realizes this may be a legendary kind of passive-aggressive rebellion meant purely to get under his skin. Not long after, Terran arrives and bursts into hearty laughter, praising the two for making the barracks look completely refreshed. The other soldiers are startled to see Terran laughing, since he normally keeps a blank face and rarely shows emotion. After laughing for a while, Terran calls Damien and Kyle over. He asks whether they truly cleaned the entire place by themselves. When the two boys say they did, he wonders why they cleaned it so thoroughly instead of simply giving it a quick surface sweep. Damien answers that Diurnal had given them the order, so they were only carrying it out as instructed. Terran is surprised by the answer and tries to figure out what is really going on inside Damien's head. After years on battlefields where survival is uncertain, Terran has learned to judge people quickly. He then observes Kyle closely and decides that, with a little refinement, Kyle could be placed in real combat. Yet no matter how long Terran studies Damien, he cannot read him at all. He also wonders why the training camp's top graduate would endure this without a single complaint. Terran decides Damien must have a particular reason for coming here, and he looks forward to uncovering what it is. Setting that thought aside, Terran gathers everyone's attention. Then, wrapping his arms around Damien and Kyle, he tells the unit to properly welcome their youngest members and help them settle in. Damien and Kyle feel relieved, realizing they have finally been acknowledged as true members of the team. At night, Damien cannot fall asleep as memories of his previous life keep surfacing. Back then, he was in the barracks with Diurnal, who asked if the war would ever end. Damien considered the question briefly, before saying it would only end if they gave up and surrendered. Diurnal then told Damien to make sure he did not pass before him. Damien told him not to joke about something like that, but Diurnal still treated it as a promise. Looking back now, Damien realizes he never actually gave Diurnal a proper answer. Even so, in a certain sense, he still managed to keep that promise. After all, he had survived on the battlefield longer than Diurnal did. Since sleep will not come, Damien decides to practice his monocultivation method. With that in mind, he walks into the forest beside the barracks. There, Damien spots someone practicing swordsmanship. When he looks more closely, he realizes the person is Diurnal. Damien is not surprised, because in his previous life, Diurnal had always been obsessed with training. He notices Diurnal struggling with a greatsword and wonders why he chose that weapon. Given Diurnal's strength and speed, it is a poor fit and clearly works against him. Still, Damien chooses not to speak up. In his previous life, it took ages to persuade Diurnal to change weapons, and saying anything now would likely earn him a scolding, even if Diurnal could not truly hurt him. Damien does not want to damage the small connection he has managed to build with Diurnal, so he leaves him alone and decides to suggest the change when the right moment comes. The next morning, the soldiers assemble for training before a massive, rugged mountain. Even before it starts, complaints already fill the air. One soldier decides to have some fun before the captain arrives and encourages the others to bet on whether the rookies can survive the stamina drill. Everyone quickly agrees, putting down several silver coins and betting that the rookies will collapse before the morning training ends. Kyle grows irritated when he realizes the soldiers are using them as entertainment, and their dismissive attitude annoys him even more. Damien, meanwhile, is surprised by how disorganized the unit is, and how no one is keeping the soldiers under control. Having had enough, Damien walks toward them while Kyle silently wonders what he is planning. Damien then steps in behind the soldiers and offers to take part in the wager. His offer makes them laugh, as they think he is willingly setting himself up to lose. Damien does not back down and instead suggests changing the conditions. He takes out a gold coin and declares that he will bet it all on himself, claiming he will beat everyone in the morning training and finish first. Soldiers' mood changes the moment they hear Damien's arrogant challenge. Damien then asks if they have any extra conditions to add. The soldiers begin grinning, certain they can teach him his place. One of them adds that if Damien wins, all the money from the wager will go to him. However, if he loses, he must handle everyone's laundry for an entire month. Since a penalty has been added for losing, Damien asks to set one condition for himself as well. He demands free time during training hours for 1 month. As soon as the soldiers hear this, the atmosphere shifts sharply. Before they can refuse, Terran arrives and approves Damien's condition. He then calls Diurnal forward and orders him to take part in the bet too. Diurnal has no interest in joining, but Terran provokes him by asking if he is afraid of losing to a junior. Diurnal explains explains that he simply does not want to waste money on a match with such an obvious outcome. Since Diurnal claims money is the issue, Terran offers to pay for him, leaving Diurnal no room to refuse. Terran then promises that if Damien outperforms the seniors, he will grant him free time during training hours. After that, he coldly warns the seniors that anyone who loses to Damien will face brutal training for the next month. He tells them to take the bet seriously and move as if everything depends on it. Terran's tone unsettles the soldiers, and they begin regretting the wager. Still, it also fires them up, making them determined not to lose face. Meanwhile, Damien quietly observes them, satisfied that everything is going as planned. In truth, he did not join the bet merely to earn free time. His real aim is to change the rotten mood in the camp, where the soldiers live as though each day might be their last. Damien knows that surviving without hope will eventually harm them and everything around them. Soon after, Terran announces that physical training is about to begin. For today's drill, he orders each soldier to carry a large log and climb all the way to the peak of Rocky Mountain. The soldiers immediately object, saying this is not their usual routine. They point out that this kind of training is meant for rookies, but Terran snaps at them to be quiet. He then orders them to stop whining, pick up a log, and start moving at once. Without hesitation, the group lifts the logs onto their shoulders and begins climbing toward the summit of Rocky Mountain. Only a few minutes after starting the climb, most of them were already having a hard time. At the same time, they wondered why Terran had suddenly changed their usual training routine. One man says it must be because of the rookies, while another worries they may collapse soon since this harsh training is completely new to them. Yet when they look back to check on the rookies, the soldiers are shocked to find no one there. This leaves them confused, wondering where they could have gone. Sensing that Damien may have moved ahead, they quickly raise their eyes toward the summit. To their surprise, he is already close to the top. They immediately start wondering when Damien managed to get ahead of everyone. What they do not realize is that with his new gear, this climb is nothing to him. Damien's ring not only lightens his body, but also reduces the weight of anything he carries. Because of that, the wooden log feels almost weightless. Damien feels relieved knowing he chose the right ring. Before long, he turns back to check on the senior soldiers. Then he notices that they are still far behind him. The only person barely keeping pace is Diurnal. Even so, Damien is surprised by what he sees. Meanwhile, Diurnal struggles to keep going and realizes that Damien is already close to reaching the summit. A short while later, Damien crosses the finish line, leaving everyone stunned. Even Terran is shocked since he never expected Damien to beat Diurnal. Terran immediately announces that the training session is finished, and as he had promised, he warns the senior soldiers that their own training is about to become truly unbearable. What they do not know is that this harsh training will soon become the smallest of their problems. Suddenly, one of the soldiers alerts Terran to something happening below at their unit building. Terran turns and is startled to see a red flag raised in the center of the barracks. Since a red flag means a grade 1 emergency, the situation is clearly serious. Not long after, Terran and the others return to the barracks. When Terran asks why the red flag was raised, he is told that several deaths occurred in Bronzerian Forest. Terran asks who the victims were and where the attack happened. The informant explains that they were herb gatherers, and the incident took place inside the forest's restricted area. Terran's vice commander Aaron mutters a curse, wondering why people keep going where they are forbidden. Terran then asks how serious the damage is and what kind of monster attacked them. Informant says nothing has been confirmed yet. All they know is that the herb gatherers entered the forbidden zone with 6 mercenaries, and the monster's identity remains unknown. Terran asks how many soldiers can be mobilized at once, and Aaron replies that they can gather around 70 men, not counting the injured. Terran tells him to leave out even the lightly wounded and assemble only 50 fully healthy soldiers as quickly as possible. After Aaron leaves to make preparations, Terran sinks into thought. Their situation is worsening, and the constant missions trouble him, making him fear the forest may be changing into something far more dangerous. Soon after that, Aaron gathers the healthy soldiers together. Terran then orders them to collect their weapons and move out. Before he can depart, Damien and Kyle ask permission to come with them. Terran rejects them immediately, explaining that real combat is different from training no matter how impressive their results were. He then orders them to remain at the barracks, but Damien and Kyle refuse to give up. Damien promises they will only work as rear porters, reminding Terran of the stamina and strength they showed during training. Terran thinks it over for a moment, yet he feels embarrassed that the unit's current state has forced them to depend on 2 rookies. With no better option, Terran accepts. He orders them to carry the spare equipment, stay in the rear, and avoid taking part in the actual fight. As he prepares to leave, he tells Diurnal to hand the spare equipment over to the 2 of them. However, when the time comes to pass it over, Diurnal hesitates. Seeing his expression, Damien remembers that this forest is where something happened to Diurnal in his previous life. In that past life, DNL told Damien there was a demon in Bronzerian Forest, but Damien had refused to believe it. Diurnal insisted it had to be a demon, because it was nothing like an ordinary ordinary monster. He had seen it himself. It appeared to be a lone demon orc overpowering an iron wolf. Under normal circumstances, 5 orcs would be needed to take down a single iron wolf. As Damien keeps thinking about Dynal's past life, and the reason Neocalitz was disbanded, a sudden sharp pain strikes his head, making it difficult for him to organize his memories. For some reason, everything feels mixed together, so he chooses to stop thinking about it, and wait until they reach the forest to judge the situation himself. Once the team has assembled, Taron calls out and asks whether everyone's equipment is ready. After they confirm it, he gives a brief speech urging the team to think carefully before making any life or death choice. He also warns them to stay away from unnecessary danger and reminds them that coming back alive must be their first priority. When his speech ends, he orders them to move out, and as they leave, Damien feels a surge of excitement for his first real battle since being reborn. A few hours later, they reach Bronzerian Forest. Taron orders everyone to search the nearby area in teams of 3, warning them not to move beyond each other's sight. While the others form their teams, Taron tells Damien and Kyle to remain close to him. As they step into the restricted zone, the atmosphere of the forest suddenly shifts. Damien observes that it looks like an ordinary forest, yet somehow feels like a battlefield. The instant he enters, every instinct in Damien's body warns him that this place is extremely dangerous. He can sense it because of the 5 years he spent fighting on battlefields in his previous life. After a few minutes inside, they suddenly hear someone shouting from another team. Taron turns toward the sound and asks whether they have found something. When the soldiers call him over to see their discovery, Taron quickly rushes to their location. There, he finds a wide clearing where the herb gatherers' bodies are lying. Aaron wonders why weapons are still scattered around when the search party supposedly swept the area. Taron says they likely fled in haste after seeing such a terrifying scene. Taron looks over the surrounding area and spots several massive trees ripped apart, leaving him to wonder what kind of monster could cause such damage. Aaron guesses it may have been a bear-type monster, but Taron doubts any ordinary bear-type creature could leave this much destruction behind. Aaron then wonders if it could have been an ogre, but Damien speaks up. He tells them it is definitely not an ogre while pointing out the body of a red bear lying before him. After examining the deep claw marks on the bear, Damien agrees with Aaron that it may be a bear-type monster. Judging by the distance between the claws, he concludes the creature must be huge. That would also explain why so many trees had been torn apart. Taron is impressed by Damien's sharp reasoning, asks where he learned to analyze things that way. Damien explains that his father was a hunter, so although he is not truly familiar with forests, he learned quite a bit from him. Taron praises him for absorbing those lessons well. Kyle stares at Damien in confusion, wondering when his father had become a hunter. He is about to point out that Damien once said his father was a soldier, but Damien shoots him a firm glare, silently warning him to keep his mouth shut. A short while later, Taron tells the team to prepare to return and orders them to collect the fallen, since their families deserve to receive them back. Damien respects Taron's choice, knowing that pushing deeper into the forest would be reckless. Since they have only found traces, the team needs to return, plan, and learn what they are facing. Damien realizes this must be what Taron is thinking and silently acknowledges him as an excellent commander. He also understands why Dynal missed him so deeply in his previous life. Just as the group prepares to leave, Damien suddenly feels something moving toward them. He immediately shouts for everyone to drop down. Unfortunately, they cannot react fast enough before a massive boulder suddenly comes hurtling in, leaving several soldiers injured. When the dust clears, some soldiers are pinned beneath the rock, while the others who escaped harm wonder where it even came from. Damien quickly calls out to Kyle. The two immediately lift the boulder that is trapping the soldiers underneath. As a few men help Damien and Kyle hold the huge rock up, Taron orders the rest to assist the wounded squad members. Once the trapped soldiers are pulled free, Taron grows worried about their injuries. But Damien takes out an amancho herb and tells them to chew it. He explains that keeping it in their mouths to draw out the juice should ease the pain. Taron quickly stops him, explaining that eating amancho herb directly is poisonous. Damien replies that combining it with Nemoja fruit seeds will cancel out the poison. He tells Taron to have the injured soldiers chew it while they are still conscious. Watching the injured men chew the herb, Taron cannot help wondering how Damien knows so much. Damien then snaps his attention back to the situation, reminding him that they must return to camp at once, because whatever threw the rock is still nearby. But before Damien can even finish his warning, a gigantic bear-type monster suddenly appears, striking fear into everyone. The towering creature looms over the soldiers, leaving them stunned by what they are seeing. None of them has ever faced a monster that large, and they cannot understand how a black bear could grow into something so terrifying. Taron immediately orders the team to get ready for battle. Everyone draws their weapons and takes their stance. At the moment the monster swings its claws toward them, the soldiers scatter desperately to avoid the blow. Taron orders the wounded to be moved to the rear while the others surround the beast. He then commands them to attack its legs. Taron calls for Helson, the team's tank, to make the first move. Halsin steps in with confidence and swings his axe at the monster's leg, but the blade barely manages to leave a mark on its hide. Seeing Halsin lose focus, Taran shouts at him to stay alert, yet before Halsin can respond, the monster strikes him and sends him crashing to the ground. It then prepares to deliver another blow. Taran rushes in at the last moment and blocks the attack with his sword. As someone drags Halsin out of danger, Taran notices that 3 of his men are already badly hurt, and he swears the monster will not leave alive. He then orders every soldier surrounding the creature to attack together. They are told to keep striking until they can break through its tough hide. Meanwhile, Aaron is busy stopping Damien and Kyle from being pulled into the fight. Taran then calls for Dianel to move, and Dianel instantly launches himself forward. With one powerful slash, he cuts off one of the monster's paws. As the beast lets out a pained roar, Taran prepares to deliver the final strike and bring the monster down. He channels mana into his sword. Damien watches in stunned silence. Once the blade is filled with mana, Taran springs forward. With a single decisive strike, he brings the beast down instantly. After the fight ends, the soldiers angrily kick the monster and curse it for attacking them. Meanwhile, Taran examines the creature carefully, unable to understand where such a monster could have come from. When he lifts its fur, he discovers several black spots spread across the monster's hide. Taran suggests it may be contagious, saying similar spots often appear on patients suffering from infectious diseases. Hearing this, the soldiers quickly back away from the creature, except for Damien, who continues observing it closely. After observing it for some time, Damien concludes there is only one possible reason such an unnatural monster could exist. With that in mind, he decides to track down where it came from. Soon after, Taran orders Aaron to take several men and keep watch, while another soldier named Brent prepares to skin the monster for armor material. Damien stops them, explaining that the monster's hide cannot be made into armor. Brent immediately asks why that is. Taran also fixes his gaze sharply on Damien. Just as he suspected, Damien clearly knows more than he is saying. Taran then orders everyone to leave the monster's hide behind and return to the base. However, he tells Damien to come with him right away. Once they reach the barracks, Taran privately questions Damien about the black markings on the monster. Damien explains that the bear appears to have been contaminated by demonic energy. Taran asks if he means the dark power used by black mages, and Damien confirms that he does. This makes Taran wonder if black mages are hiding in the Brenserian forest, even though black magic is widely known to be forbidden. Damien says he is not certain black mages are there, but something carrying demonic energy may be corrupting the monsters. In simple terms, demonic energy is power gained through demon worship, and anyone exposed to it for too long usually meets a painful end. Damien remembers that in his previous life, a magic stone filled with demonic energy was found in the Brenserian forest. Back then, the world learned of it after an empire-shaking incident. According to the reports from that time, the Neokulits unit discovered the demon-corrupted monsters first. Afterward, the Imperial Army organized an expedition to subdue them. Damien realizes this must be the point where everything first began. Demonic energy poisons more monsters over time, strengthening their bodies and changing them into frightening creatures. However, they can still be dealt with before that power grows too far. After hearing Damien's thoughts on the forest incident, Taran asks how he knows so much. Damien simply claims his father once experienced something similar with such monsters. Taran's curiosity is stirred, so he asks Damien to share everything he knows about this so-called similar encounter. Though Taran is unsure how much to believe, he listens, because they have few options in this unfamiliar situation. Damien then begins telling the made-up story of his hunter father's experience. The next day, the soldiers remain exhausted after yesterday's close call. Meanwhile, Kyle wakes up screaming when Damien calls his name to rouse him. At that moment, a man suddenly bursts in to deliver exciting news. He reveals that the Brenserian forest has been sealed off. Starting today, no one is allowed inside, not herb gatherers, and not soldiers. For now, the soldiers will only train, with no subjugation missions scheduled. Everyone welcomes the news, since it gives the team, especially the injured men, time to recover. Kyle notices that Damien does not look pleased. Damien brushes it aside and acts happy, knowing the rest of the team truly needs this chance to rest. For Damien, however, it feels unbearable. He had hoped to investigate the demonic energy source while gaining real combat experience, so the sudden restriction frustrates him. Not long after, they notice a group of heavily armed garrison soldiers marching in the barracks, leaving them to wonder what is going on. A few minutes later, the garrison soldiers arrive at Taran's office. Taran, however, shows little enthusiasm at their arrival and asks what they want. The captain first thanks Taran for his report on the forest. He then explains that the temple agreed to assist, since they also sensed an evil aura from the monster's body. Hearing this, Taran realizes Damien was right, making him question whether the forest truly is connected to demonic energy. Since the situation remains unclear, the captain tells Taran that the temple will send a priest for a joint search operation in the Brenserian forest. The captain then suggests bringing Damien along since he understands demonic energy. Taran refuses, saying it is unwise to send an inexperienced rookie into the field. The captain reminds him that Damien is the only one who understands the matter and discovered it first. Terran wants to keep refusing, but he knows turning down the proposal could bring punishment on his unit, so he has no real choice but to agree. He then orders Aaron to go and bring Damien. Damien, meanwhile, is still feeling as if his life has suddenly become miserable because of the ban on entering the Bronzerian forest.